for Johnston now. Speaking of big plays, he's got it, and it's a touchdown.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
And he'll be satisfied with this play. A beautiful twisting interception in the air by Brian Branch.
365 Sports is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
2nd down and 9. Bootleg. McNamara on the move. Lets it go. It's a touchdown. Schoonmaker.
365 Sports is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952.
On 2nd down, it's Daniels on the keeper, trying to break free. Daniels stayed in bounds and scored a Kansas touchdown.
Have you subscribed to our YouTube channel? Search 365 Sports on YouTube. Brought to you by TFNB, your bank for life.
Rather with time. Underthrown and intercepted by the Wildcats. Julius Prince, the Iowa transfer.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
It's Craig having an off day. He'll be back tomorrow. On Wednesday and Thursday, we will be full throttle. Stick your head in the tank of gasoline, light it with a match with coverage from Big 12 Media Days. That will happen Wednesday and Thursday from Big 12 Media Days at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, with 14 teams over 2 days being involved, with ADs for most, and some even presidents, and of course players and coaches. Brett Yormark and the Big 12, and we'll have a note about them, another little promotion that they're doing around some of the campuses of the incoming schools in the Big 12. Let's get to this, Paul. What's the biggest storyline? And there's a lot to get to when it comes to Northwestern. A really interesting note from RG3 about why he played through injury at the end of his rookie year that was in The Athletic. A replacement for Reggie Bush on the Fox Big Noon kickoff, the pregame show. A couple of other nuggets. Basketball, Bob Huggins, what's going on with that? Pat Fitzgerald, of course, as I mentioned. But what would you think is the biggest storyline starting on Wednesday?
Starting on Wednesday, I think the biggest storyline is, and we don't hear from Brett Yormark until Thursday this year, the state of the conference, which is actually the better way to do it. towards the end, get a lot of stuff out of the way. Lunchtime, not 9 o'clock in the morning when people are still trying to figure out if all their stuff's working. But I think the biggest story is what's the Big 12 going to be this year, and what's it going to look like maybe even as early as next year in new teams
so you think
possibly coming in.
The storyline this week will be what is their future, not so much what is the present.
Yeah, I do. I think that's going to be what people are asking about, like what's the future and how far along the line that is, because we are going to be here more than likely, unless the Pac-12, does the Undertaker thing and pops up and is like, look at this, we've got a TV deal. We're not going to know about that this week. And there's a good chance that George Kliavkoff on July 21st is backstage going,
or maybe he says, hey, let's release what we have now that we have it finalized on one of the days the Big 12's meeting in Arlington. But that would be, Craig brought that up a little bit. All right, so Brock Miracle, thank you very much in the chat room, along with a lot of others. I don't know if I've seen Brock's name on here. Who would you rather have if, in fact, either was to join the Big 12, UConn or Utah?
Utah?
Oh, Utah. I don't think that's even I mean, I know the UConn basketball prowess and the tradition, and basically a UConn is like a blue blood. They've kind of just forced their way into it. But in my opinion, there's no question Utah, if that was to happen, I don't think it will. UConn, of course, has been out there along with the basketball additions of Gonzaga with the Big 12 at some point, perhaps in the future.
I cannot say this emphatically enough. UConn needs to be good in football for about a decade for me to ever want to turn them on the television. They need a long time of being good. Or they need some sort of dynamic player that you have to see that comes out of nowhere. And that can happen. But for basketball, great. But if football is the thing that's dictating this, UConn does absolutely nothing for the Big 12. It doesn't increase the value of their football contract at all. Now, if you're talking football and increasing value of the contract, then Utah, a two-time defending Power 5 champion, sure does.
And one that it looks like they're in the same mold year in and year out. Whether they continue to win Pac-12 titles remains to be seen, but they seem to kind of have it very, very well. From Brock, thank you. I've been listening for a while. Great stuff. Utah would be my answer, too. Paxton, have you guys committed to getting Steve Sarkisian? I have. When did I say that? I think it was last Thursday or Friday. I sent an email to all 14 of the Big 12 teams and media relations directors, and we have heard back from about 80% of them on interview requests with either players and or coaches, and even the possibility of others, ADs and media analysts. Sir blah, blah, blah. Utah fans will never be able to live it down if they have to join Brigham Young in a conference. I know everyone knows about the history, and I kind of get that same impression from Utah that you might get from some of the other Pac-12 schools, that they have no interest whatsoever and would not want to be a part of the Big 12. That's easy to say and makes sense until you might not have an option that is really going to keep you where you are right now, which is a team that is running the Pac-12. If Utah wins the Pac-12 this year, with all the quarterback play, Paul, they have coming back, with all the teams that are loaded, with USC loaded, with Washington loaded, with Oregon, of course, being Oregon, and others, if they, in UCLA, with what Kelly's been able to do to kind of get them pretty solid, sustaining what they've doing, if you win it, you win the Pac-12 this year, I think I'm not saying this because you could end up with a couple of losses, but if you win the Pac-12 this year, and let's say you have one loss, you should be a part of the conversation when it comes to the college football playoff. And especially if you have a really nice non-conference win that leads up the conference play.
That would have happened for USC or Utah last year had they just had one loss. That was the two losses that kept them out. So, yeah, if you were the Pac-12 with Oregon, Washington, USC, and Utah, the four at the top, and let's not forget about Oregon State, who won 10 games last year and then just brought in DJU, who I know struggled at Clemson, but might actually fit better at Oregon State with what they do on offense. So that's going to be, and I'm not even talking about Washington State was pretty good last year, or Arizona State and Arizona appear to be on on
with
the rise.
Dillingham, what he's doing, and also with Arizona.
And Jed Fish.
And Jed Fish,
like,
and the commitment they had recently, the 5-star player. So there they are. That now, here's a note. What in the world is Northwestern going to do with Pat Fitzgerald? So this story went from there was hazing, and the school did an investigation, hired a firm to do it, to Fitzgerald getting a 2-week suspension without pay like now. And then you started to have more information. And you got to be careful again. There are some outlets that are like, this is well ahead of the curve. Like former players who are either not condemning, but like saying what is being said by the whistleblower is ridiculous. And then now you'll have a player or two that has been a part of the program saying, no, absolutely this was going on. Paul, is Pat Fitzgerald going to be the head coach at Northwestern when they start the season in September?
It appears that there's too many things coming from all directions for that to be true, in my estimation. I don't know. I mean, like these things don't slow down. I mean, he's got long tenure there, and Northwestern, as you can tell, doesn't like to. I mean, they're not concerned about year in and year out results on the field because they know who they are. You know, they know that they're going to have some years where they're going to be really good, and they know they have some years where it's not going to be that because you're Northwestern and you have academic standards to meet. And, you know, sometimes like Northwestern and Stanford live in that same world. You're going to have some times where you're going to have a lot of really good depth of guys who can, you know, be that student athlete and have that elite academic run. But some of those guys who are also elite academics might want to go to other schools all at the same time. And then you don't have that. So they've made their peace with the fact that they're not going to be contending for the Big Ten year in, year out. But these are things that just don't go away. And hazing is and should be a hot and button issue because it's the stupidest thing in the world. And it has no reason to exist, especially in the ways that it winds up doing. I mean, this isn't like, you know, putting a guy in a room full of the smelly laundry and seeing how long he can stand it before he knocks and begs to come out. This is abusing and touching and doing things that are not acceptable in any walk of life. So, you know, they've got to root it out of sports. Whether Pat Fitzgerald knew about it, there's these rumors that he had like a crew that was hazing people, this Shrek's List thing. We'll see how that all shakes out. But I do think they need to take more time and look deeper into evidence because they looked into one incident. But I think if you see hazing is built over time, Smokey. You and I both played high school sports. You played a little bit of college sports. Yeah, and there was a little bit of hazing. It wasn't like what I would call bad hazing when I was in high school. It wasn't anything like this, but everybody learned it from the class before them. So there's got to be more evidence than it was just this group of players because those things quite often are passed down generation to generation to generation of players.
I got to tell you something, and there's part of when you see things that no longer are accepted, that doesn't mean that they were okay 25 or 50 years ago. Hazing was something that if I was a part of it or if I knew about it, I never saw where it went above and beyond just like being like stupid young kids, like young boys. I never saw anything that would have been of the level of anything sexual. For example, whatever the allegations, we have to remember these are allegations about what was happening with Northwestern, even though they're now, Adam Rittenberg just a minute ago obtained the initial correspondence from Northwestern and the whistleblower to the compliance and shows, in fact, there are pictures. The email includes 2 whiteboard photos with the names on that Shrek's List and also runs giving, which are part of the hazing. Hazing to me was either what you did was you walked away or you fought back. That's what it was like for me. And I don't remember anything that would have like even 20, 30, 50 years later had gotten me to the point where like I should not have done that. But things have changed. And so it will be interesting. He's their best coach ever. Northwestern, Gary Barnett was really good. He took them to a Rose Bowl back in the 90s. But it appears, and of course he's an alum and all of that right now a lot of the smoke. Now we also have to make sure we understand that a lot of these are allegations. However, some of this is in the independent review, or at least in the investigation that, of course, started these stories in the first place.
So when I mentioned Shrek's List, Conundrum says Shrek's List, everybody knew about that, Paul. And I would caution to say knowing about something and knowing what it really is are two different things. So there can be the Shrek's List on the wall that everybody knows about, but having what's alleged is like it very much sounds like the plot of A Few Good Men, where everybody knew that Code Reds existed, but until that kid died in the movie, nobody cared until it went too far. And so that's how it goes. Like, yes, Shrek's List can exist, and Pat Fitzgerald can also have said, I'm okay with you guys razzing these dudes a little bit, and then if it gets out of hand, I'll tell you, and I'm not trying to throw Pat Fitzgerald into this, but this is not just recently. This is through the history of mankind. When the big, gigantic entity gets in trouble, it protects itself first.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if Pat Fitzgerald is in trouble, he's going to protect himself first, mostly because that is human instinct, and also because you want to make sure, this doesn't get out of hand. So we'll see what was, how it shakes out. But there are a lot of varying reports now. And again, I think where the university messed up in this particular case was they investigated this one incident of hazing, and hazing is not something that happens one time.
No,
it's something
it's
that
a tradition.
It's a tradition.
It's almost a tradition.
So if you were trying to say, well, this one he didn't know about, then yeah, maybe this one particularly he didn't know about. But if you're going to be the guy who's a coach for 2 decades at a place and not know about it, then that falls into the ignorance or complicity. Which one's better?
Yeah, but, I did see immediately, and this is what we see now, anytime there's any kind of a controversy or allegations, that there's 3 or 4 national columnists who immediately say Pat Fitzgerald should resign. This is before we knew everything.
I don't know that. Like, do we know that yet?
No,
like,
that's what I'm saying. But it's just like immediately they must resign. It's as if we don't have any kind of system. And again, all of the evidence, and eventually players who are a part of the program who start to back up the whistleblower, who they start to talk, then you're going to start seeing something. But one whistleblower is sometimes not enough to bring down the entire army. So we'll see what happens with that. I don't know what's going to happen with him. Am I wanting, I want Pat Fitzgerald fired? No, I don't, because I don't know enough information. If Pat Fitzgerald himself feels like he should resign because he doesn't want to bring any more negativity to his alma mater and the school he loves, that's his decision. Speaking of which, weren't we told about 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago that Bob Huggins had resigned? Now there are, at least I see, different parts of the letter that may have been written by his wife. And now his attorney is saying that Bob Huggins never resigned. If he loves the West Virginia, the campus, and I mean, a lot of people, this really hurt a lot of people. We had guests on the show that this hurt a lot of people, hurt them, even though the decision was going to be that Bob Huggins was going to have to resign. And Fran Fraschilla, the Huggins situation is strange and can now cause long-term damage to West Virginia hoops. If not only affects the program right now, but any high-quality candidate from outside of the family has to think twice about the potential soap opera ahead. It's sad because many reasons this job has explosive potential. Remember, Carissa, they kept him. They had another transfer come in, I think, from Florida State over the weekend, a player. They've lost some. One, of course, the young man Toussaint going to Texas Tech. But this is like, man, because I could have seen if Huggins resigns, which everyone thought that he did, except Huggins maybe and his lawyer, or perhaps they never did, like Mountain West Conference and San Diego State, but a little more maybe not more serious. I'm thinking they would have honored him in some ways, and they still might do that in the end, but this is weird, kind of a like out of nowhere. I thought that story was already taken care of, put in a file, and moved on.
Yeah, so did West Virginia.
I think so.
And they didn't. It's bad because whoever was going to take over next year, even if this doesn't happen, is going to be not Coach Bob Smith. It's going to be Coach not Huggy Bear. That's who they're going to be for a little while until they win. So even and I'm leaving the interim coach out of this because that was going to happen no matter what. Whether this was a suspension for the season while Bob Huggins got his life together, or if it was Bob Huggins resigning forever from the University of West Virginia or West Virginia University, that was going to be an interim situation because of the timing of this and how late in the summer that it happened. But for the next coach, whoever that is, until they win, they're going to be not Bob Huggins.
Well, is what kind of Fran was talking about.
Exactly. They're going to be not Bob Huggins.
Yeah.
And now this exacerbates that even more because Bob Huggins is saying he doesn't want to leave. So now not Bob Huggins is going to always have the shadow, and a loud shadow, and not a quietly resigning himself to just being out of it until his life is back together, and then they could bring him in and say, thank you, Bob, and move on, when people have kind of, forgiven over time, which happens a lot. Now it's a whole situation, and it's going to remain that way.
So a little football. We're getting closer and closer. Eventually there'll be the AP and coaches football poll, just like you're having all these media days, the Big 12 Media Day poll. I saw where the volleyball poll came out, etc. But and don't put it up yet, Garrett, but so Football Blitz is an email that I get. I think it's almost every Monday during the football season. And they will go into historical perspective, like mass amount of information. Actually, I first saw this from Craig Haley, who works for the, I think it's the Football Writers Association of America. But if you think about Blue Bloods, the Blue Bloods, and there's about 3 to 5 names that are maybe out of this that because they haven't had success for that long, like Miami and Florida State, even though Miami's really kind of gone into a little bit of a shell. So here is the first page. This is from themediablitz.com. This is not preseason appearances. This is not most years in the AP poll. This is the top 10, 1 through 10, of the most appearances in what would be the end of the season Associated Press college football poll. Michigan, just ahead of rival Ohio State. This is top 25, not top 5, 10, or 15, top 25. Oklahoma, this is not a surprise. These first 5 names, none of them are a surprise. USC 6, not a surprise. Texas 7, not a surprise. Nebraska 8, despite what has been 20 years, maybe at least 12 or 13 years of yuck. Penn State, not a surprise. Tennessee at 10. Now, these are the top 10 most final season AP poll top 25s. 87 years they've done this, and Michigan has been ranked, which is probably about 75 or 80% of the time, at 63. Think about the bubbles. Michigan has pretty much always stayed relevant, right? They've had maybe some ups and downs, but they've really been pretty consistent. Nobody may be more consistent in Ohio State as far as in my lifetime. Oklahoma, they had the Snellenberger, John Blake years. They really struggled, and they're right there in the middle of it. Alabama, they haven't been Nick Saban, Paul Bear, Bryant, Gene Stallings all the time. There's Notre Dame. They have won a national title since 1988, and they've had some ups and downs. USC, they had their wilderness, I guess you could say, after the NCAA, although they continue to win. Texas has had a couple of bubbles where they kind of were there, but they weren't, especially like in the last 10 years. They've still finished in the top 25. I don't know how many since 2009, but they have. And then Nebraska, I don't think they finished in the top 25 at the end of the year, and I don't remember the last time they did. Maybe 1 year under Mike Riley, and I can't even tell you when. And then there's Penn State. They've had their bubble. And I mean by that, the ups and downs. And then Tennessee, which they went through a long time. They just weren't high level. But you don't see Georgia there. And, of course, Georgia, they've had their wilderness. You don't see Florida State, Miami only because – and they've had some times, but they just haven't been around playing football very often since, what, the 70s? Yeah. And who was it Miami that actually almost canceled their football program?
Yeah, right before Schnellenberger.
And until Bobby Bowden arrived at Florida State and took on everybody, whoever, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Nebraska, did not matter. Played anybody, anywhere, anytime. That was in the mid to late 70s when they said, the hell with it. And so that's 50 years. And of that time, look how many times. I think they were like at 38 of those years.
Yeah, so the schools Florida always kind of had, although their real glory never came until Spurrier got there as a quarterback, and then he was gone for a while and then back as a coach. But they were good. They just weren't great. So the intersection of the three Florida schools was in the really 80s and 90s, where Bowden and Schnellenberger and Jimmy Johnson and Dennis Erickson in the 90s, and then Spurrier taking over at Florida and taking them from a team that they were good. Mm-hmm. They were good under Galen Hall there at times. They were good, but Spurrier made them great and took them to a level they'd never really been before. As a matter of fact, arguably the best thing that ever happened to Florida was Steve Spurrier, because he won a Heisman Trophy there when he was a player and then came back and won a national championship as a coach and put them on the map.
From Sir Blah, blah, blah. Better metric would be the last 40 or so years after a bunch of conferences and schools were dropped into 1AA or FCS. There are more, I think, what is called FBS Division I schools than ever before. There's like 131 now? It seemed like just a few years ago it was like 113, and now there's more than that. David Williams, I went recently back and forth with Nebraska fan about their irrelevance in college football over the past 20 years. That fan just did not want to accept they're no longer a factor. They're not. There's a reason why they've been through what was Solich to Callahan to Pelini, who actually won, but also got beat up badly about once or twice a year and also couldn't control himself, to Mike Riley. They went from the angry guy who still won to Mr. Nice Guy, and they were okay. Then you had, Scott Frost, and then that didn't last very long, and now you have Matt Rule. So, and I might have forgotten somebody in between because I probably tried to forget that, but you're right. No question. They had the 2009 team with Ndamukong Suh that took Texas to the last second before losing on a gutty field goal that was good by UT in the championship game that launched them to play for the national title. That was really their last really good team. They had maybe 3 or 4 others since then, but it's very sporadic since that time. And when you have Ndamukong Suh, you better be good in something, because he's one of the best players at that position anytime in college football history.
Yeah, they just haven't gotten Ndamukong Suhs anymore. And they used to get guys like that all the time. And that was like the last one of theirs. Nebraska, Miami, and Michigan, and Florida might be starting this right now, kind of in the middle of it. But Nebraska, Miami, and Michigan were kind of overlapping of they just had the 90s, and then like everybody got like the Y2K bug hit them or something like that, because for the majority of the 2000s, their best seasons were good seasons, but not to the standard that they had. And then they've had these long droughts of bad. And Michigan's out of it now. Clearly, Michigan's out of it. They've cleared the virus. They are now back to being Michigan again. Nebraska and Miami are still trying to figure out how to do that. And again, new coach for Nebraska this year, Mario Cristobal in his second year coming up. So we'll see. And for the most part, we're not talking about, short 5 to 6 year periods. We're talking about decades now of them not being in contention for the national title, which when you started out the season, when Howard Schnellenberger and Dennis Erickson and Jimmy Johnson were recruiting, their goal was, how do we get players to win the national title?
Yep. And quite frankly, that is pretty much what it's all about. That's what we look at. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy a season if your team's not supposed to be good. When Baylor went 12-2 a couple of years ago, I mean, that was amazing. But they didn't win the national title. Doesn't mean you didn't enjoy that. Or like what TCU did last year, or what Utah's done with the Pac-12, or teams like that make runs that Kansas State last year. you can still have a great season. It depends on what the standard is and also what the realistic goals are. And we are about to start it. And the good news, everybody gets to play each other for the most part and eventually figure that out. Now, the Big 12 has launched yet another promotion. We'll have Justin Williams from theathletic.com as he breaks down where everybody is in the Big 12 when it comes to recruiting class of 2024 as of right now. Also, Tim Brando today a little bit after 5 o'clock among some other guests that we have. Adam Rittenberg will join us tomorrow on the latest with Northwestern and where we are and who knows what changes between now and 24 hours. So the Big 12 has their on-campus Big 12 homecoming tour, and the incoming teams will be the first ones that will have this happen. It will be a weekend. The Big 12 will celebrate Brigham Young, UCF, Cincinnati, and also Houston, and visit their campuses and eventually visit the 8 remaining schools over the next years after that and have just a weekend of, hey, here we are. Let's celebrate who we have. And that was something else, the on-campus Big 12 homecoming, a conference-wide celebration of the Big 12 brand, and we'll start with the 4 incoming schools. One other quick college football note. Reggie Bush is out. That was, I think that's been rumored for a few weeks, maybe months. He wanted more money. He's out at Fox in their big noon pregame show. Mark Ingram II. Mark Ingram will replace him as a Fox Sports analyst in the pregame show. And, Paul, what did you say about him with the Saints? With Mark Ingram and Reggie Bush?
Yeah, you replaced him with, well, I mean, they played together for a little while, but essentially replaced him with the Saints too. So Mark Ingram has made a career now out of following Reggie Bush.
There's no question Ingram won the Heisman, won a national title in 2009, but I would think when you talk about decorated, and he had a pretty good career in the NFL with almost 6,500 yards, but when you look at names, glitz, and glamour, I've heard he's good. I've seen there have been some thoughts I've read, whatever the media type stuff that you hear about, hey, this guy's going to be pretty good with Ingram as a pregame host or as an analyst. So we'll see what happens with that Fox Sports analyst. That is Mark Ingram replacing on the set Reggie Bush. Paul Catalina, I'm David Smoak. In the studio today, Jack McKenzie. We have Levi Caraway, Emery Winter, and Garrett Ross. And next is Justin Williams on Big 12 recruiting. And this is 365 Sports.
Make this the summer sales event going on now at Allen Samuels. Shop our large selection of new inventory and get amazing deals on new Ram trucks, Jeep SUVs, Chrysler minivans, or a sporty Dodge. Shop AllenSamuelsDCJ.com or come in to see us today at Allen Samuels in Waco.
Pizza, burgers, and Bears football. There's no place around Waco that serves them all other than Bubba's 33. Come show your green and gold and enjoy some of Waco's best food and beverages while watching your favorite team, the Bears. When real Bears fans get hungry, Bubba's 33 is the #1 spot for ice-cold drinks, hand-stretched, stone-baked pizzas, and bacon-infused burgers. Join us for indoor or patio dining. Bubba's 33, Waco's restaurant and proud supporter of Baylor Bears football. Sick 'em, Bears!
One size fits all. That may be all right for an adjustable belt or cheap sunglasses, but when it comes to your financial needs, no one wants a one-size-fits-all strategy. Ben Erlinson, your Edward Jones financial advisor, knows that his most important goals are yours. That's why he takes the time to understand your needs, knowing you. That's how Edward Jones makes sense of investing. Ben Erlinson, 100 North 6th Street in Waco, 254-759-8533. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
Riverbend Liquor and Wine, Lakeshore Drive, North 19th Street, right behind the bank, is a hidden gem in Waco. If you're a fan of bourbon, especially local Texas bourbons, that's where you gotta go. Balcones, TX, Devil's River, whatever it is, they've got it. Riverbend Liquor and Wine, plus the best selection of craft beers in Waco, seasonally churned out throughout the year, whether it's spring, summer, fall, or winter. Riverbend Liquor and Wine, best selection of craft beers, a speedy drive-through window, and excellent customer service. Find out more on Instagram or just go by and see them. Lakeshore Drive at North 19th Street behind the bank.
Waco Custom Marketplace is your hometown grocery store with a full-service butcher shop and bakery. Hi, this is David Smoak. The butcher shop can take your customized orders for seafood, pork, and poultry, and custom cut your favorite steaks from bacon-wrapped fillets to T-bone to bone-in ribeyes, cut specifically the way you want. They have Norwegian salmon fillets, catfish fillets, sliced ham or turkey and lunch meat, variety of cheese available, and several options of sausage links, fresh chicken breast or whole chickens, sliced bacon, pork chops, ground beef, marinated
marinated beef and chicken fajitas, and always large briskets available, plus fresh vegetables. So the great product, customer service, and family tradition of the Bauer family continues at Waco Custom Marketplace, open Monday through Saturday. A full-service butcher shop and bakery available. Waco Custom Marketplace, 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco, or WacoCustomMarketplace.com.
Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, the team physicians for Baylor Athletics, diagnosing and treating all sports-related injuries, including concussions. These specialists also provide orthopedic services for athletes and non-athletes alike, whether it's knee or shoulder pain, a wrist injury, orthopedic spine care, and even an arthritis and total joint clinic. Trust the doctors Baylor Athletics trust. Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics wants to get you back in the game.
This is 365 Sports.
The 3 o'clock hour is sponsored by Waco Custom Marketplace. Meats, sweets, Texas treats, and a cut above the rest. 425 Lake Air Drive, Waco.
You know, the month of June is huge, but really every month between now and the first signing day, which has become the main signing day in December, teams are starting to load up. Everybody kind of has their good runs, and it depends on the official visits, and also some that just wait until the end and they start picking off whoever they want, because those type names have 5 or 6 or 8 or 12 alphas, college football blue bloods they could choose from. But we've got enough evidence. And Justin Williams, theathletic.com. We've had Justin on before. He's on with us again. Justin with Craig Smoak. Out today, it's with Paul Catalina and David Smoak. Justin, right now in the Big 12, and thank you for your time. I'm glad you had a good chance to get a vacation despite me bothering you. Right now, which of the 14, who are the ones that you think in the Big 12 kind of have a little bit of that heat to them as far as the kind of runs they're having with commitments?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're still looking at the 14, but, you know, in a sense, if you're looking at the 24 class, those guys aren't going to be playing, you know, from Texas and Oklahoma. They won't be playing in the Big 12, right? So it is kind of, you know, we include them when we're talking about it right now, but does that really impact Big 12 recruiting? I'm not sure. But, you know, Texas and Oklahoma, they've always recruited well, no matter what they're playing like on the field, you know, maybe in Texas' case. And they're obviously in for some of the big name 5 stars. But you're looking at the other teams, it's hard not to be impressed by what Texas Tech is doing. You know, Joey McGuire, I think, really has things going in a good direction there. And it's not like they're coming off of a big, you know, super successful season. I think there were some positive signs last year. But to see them work in the state, I know they're still in on Micah Hudson. I know Texas Tech fans are kind of like, you know, tapping their fingers, waiting to see when Micah Hudson might announce. But they feel like they're in a good spot with him. So you got to be impressed there. You know, I think TCU, they don't have a ton of numbers. I think they're at maybe 10 commits right now. But their average player rating based on the rankings is really high. I think they've pulled in some really good, you know, 4-star talents out of Texas. And is that the playoff bump? Is that just Sonny Dykes has things moving there? Either way, I think you're encouraged by what they're doing. And then, you know, a couple of teams, West Virginia and Cincinnati, the 2 teams picked at the bottom of the preseason Big 12 standings, one of them being a newcomer in Cincinnati with a new head coach. You know, they're going more volume. I think they both have 18 commits. But, you know, this is a coach who's brand new in his first year in Scott Satterfield, and then West Virginia coaching Neil Brown, who's kind of on the hot seat. I think you have to be encouraged by what both of those squads have done, you know, this spring and summer in terms of bringing guys in and trying to set things up for 24 as well as they possibly can.
Who do you feel is flailing a little bit?
The Houston, you know, I think we've seen the bump from moving into the Big 12 for both Cincinnati and UCF. UCF has had a really good, you know, past couple of weeks in terms of getting some big 4-star commitments. They even flipped a 4-star from Cincinnati. Houston and BYU, we haven't really seen it yet in the 24 class. So to me, that part's, you know, a little concerning. Again, not necessarily total cause for alarm, but why haven't we seen a Big 12 bump for both of those schools in the 24 class yet? Kansas State only has 7 commits. There's this weird thing where their airport is shut down in Manhattan, which I think is maybe making recruiting a little bit tougher this summer specifically. But, you know, after coming off a really good season and, you know, being one of the challengers for a Big 12 title this season, many think, I'm surprised we haven't seen a little more of a bump from them. And then just the program I can't figure out in general is Oklahoma State. They lost a lot of talent, you know, exiting via the transfer portal. You know, Mike Gundy's kind of been very out there in terms of he understands the changes that are happening. And and all those kind of things, but we haven't necessarily seen the recruiting reflect, a big push. And then obviously the amount of talent they've lost via the transfer portal is a little bit concerning, but they've been so good over the past decade plus. I'm just not totally sure what to think until we, get out on the field and see if they can kind of rebound from a tough end of last season.
Have you seen, like I've seen, and it appears this way, that UCF and the Big 12 being a part of an Autonomy 5, being a part of a Power 5, even Malzahn was quoted the other day as saying some of these commitments would not happen if they weren't. You see what they could be a sleeping giant?
I mean, certainly in the right spot, right? Being in Florida, and they've had to battle that kind of group of 5 stigma when going against Florida State or Florida or just any Power 5 teams coming into their state. And to their credit, they've been successful over the past 5, 6, 7 years of kind of recruiting those guys in their state who maybe are a little overlooked or didn't have a ton of Power 5 offers. So, yeah, I totally see the appeal of, hey, now we're going to the Big 12. There aren't really any other Big 12 teams in that area, so it's not like they're going against other Big 12 teams. So I think if they can kind of keep the momentum going that they have, sure, there's definitely a little carve out that they could make in Florida where they can start pushing. Yes, we've had success, but now we also have kind of that P5 stage that we're playing on. I think there's definitely room for to be impressive and to continue growing on the recruiting trail that way.
Who do you think has used the transfer portal the best, and how has that affected their high school recruiting?
Well, that's the other thing that's kind of hard to figure out is are some of these teams saving spots? What are we going to see in terms of high school recruiting classes for the numbers that they add? Texas had a huge class the year before, but so maybe Texas won't need to go as heavy on the high school recruiting side. So I think it'll be interesting to see. We probably need a couple years of data to see how that works out. In general, I've been really impressed with Kansas, what Lance Leipold's doing there, whether it's high school recruiting or I think they've used the transfer portal really well. And so I'm encouraged there. I think Baylor specifically this past offseason did a really good job in the transfer portal, bringing in some guys who I think could be kind of immediate impact players to maybe bounce back from, again, maybe a disappointing season for them last year. So those are kind of 2 programs that immediately jump out to me as I think they're really using the transfer portal to their advantage going into a year where they could, feel like they can vie for the top half of the conference standings.
You covered Cincinnati for quite some time, and I think you still do, but now you have even a larger role with the Athletic. How bad was the timing of Fickell leaving as they're about to enter the Big 12?
Yeah, I mean, on one sense, you could say, like, wow, this is the worst possible time to kind of be resetting and having a roster turnover. I think they were already in a little bit of just a natural roster turnover anyways, even if Fickell had come back. It was definitely exacerbated by Fickell leaving and all the changes that came with it. But it's weird to think that, 16 months ago, this was a team that was in the college football playoff playing Alabama in the Cotton Bowl. And at that time, everyone's like, wow, this is going to be, great. They're going to go into the Big 12 and compete right away. I think last year with some of the attrition they had, it made evident that this was going to be a little bit more of a move, of a learning curve going to the Big 12. The biggest thing that I think got hurt with Fickell leaving was their 23 recruiting class. They just lost a lot of guys, decommitments that either went to Wisconsin or decided to go elsewhere. So it's definitely made what was already going to be a challenging process a little bit more difficult. But I've been encouraged, mainly from kind of a recruiting staffing standpoint, what Scott Satterfield has done. I don't think Cincinnati's going to have a great year this season on the field. I think them being picked 13th was fair. I think you could kind of put them anywhere in kind of that bottom chunk because of the coaching change and the roster turnover. But in terms of what they're building future long term, I'm encouraged by what Satterfield has done so far. We'll obviously see how it looks on the field. But I think it might just take a tough year or two getting acclimated to the Big 12 schedule, Big 12 talent, before they really start to kind of pick things up and put things into place.
Why did Emory Jones win that job, given his history?
I guess the question would be, did he win it, or did Ben Bryant, just not like the answer he got coming out of spring football? I think there's a very good chance if Ben Bryant had stayed, he would have won the starting quarterback job in the fall. The sense I get is that they weren't ready to pick between him and Emory Jones. Ben Bryant enters the transfer portal, and it turns out he might have a chance to now start at Northwestern. And I know he had some other big Power 5 conference teams coming after him. So I think part of it was Ben Bryant decided to leave. He didn't want to necessarily wait his last season to see if he was going to win that job, and it almost kind of gave it to Emory Jones. Emory Jones fits Scott Satterfield's system a little bit better on paper than Ben Bryant. Scott Satterfield has always kind of tended towards those dual threat quarterbacks who have an ability to get out and run. That's certainly more of a Emory Jones strength than Ben Bryant. That's not something Arizona State did much with Emory Jones last year, which was kind of curious. I think you're going to see him have a lot more opportunities to move around and create as a quarterback at Cincinnati. But I almost think it was kind of like they were between these two guys. They'd like to hold on to both of them and see how long they could push the competition. And with Ben Bryant deciding to leave it almost just kind of put it in Emory Jones' lap.
So it appears as if the Big 12, we're about to have this, hey, here we are, along with Texas and Oklahoma Wednesday and Thursday, and it's a breath of fresh air. And as a guy that covered Cincinnati, we've had John Cunningham, we've had Satterfield, we've had former players on. But for someone like yourself, and I think we've discussed this with you over the last couple of years since the Texas OU story popped, what, in your opinion, can this mean to Cincinnati? And not if they're ready or not, that happens. But what does this mean to them?
Yeah, I mean, this has been everything that the Cincinnati program and fan base has been, rooting for and honestly dying for the past 10, 12 years. Some people might forget Cincinnati was in the old Big East back when that was part of kind of the 6 BCS conferences, and they went to back-to-back BCS bowls. They were competing at the top level of college football when Brian Kelly was there, Mark D'Antonio, things like that. So then they kind of got left out in the wilderness when that last big realignment shift happened. They ended up in the American. They kind of struggled then under Tommy Tuberville and really hit rock bottom. Luke Fickell built them back up. But this is a fan base that, they knew what it was like to compete at that top level of college football there for a short stretch. And so when they had that taken away from them, that was all that they've been working towards and clamoring for the past 10 to 12 years. And it's been a long process. There were certainly stints in it when fans and even people in the program, the university, were kind of wondering, are we going to have that path back to a power conference? And to have that finally happen, you're right. It might take a little growing pains on the field or on the court, whatever it may be, for the first couple of years. But this is what they've wanted, and so there's definitely a lot of excitement just about being back at that level and, competing against schools week in and week out that value and have as much support for the program as Cincinnati fans feel like they have for the past 10, 12 years.
Justin, I got to know, I asked you to be on the show a couple weeks ago, and you couldn't do it because you were at a Taylor Swift concert.
Oh,
what was it like?
True.
The madness.
What was it like? Look, people can make fun of you for going on. You took kids and all that to it, but it seems to be quite a spectacle.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest. I was, kind of tagging along with my wife and my sister. I was certainly, in the Swiftie rankings, I was a distant third with those two. But look, it was a great show. I can't deny she played for 3 hours. The stage was great. Her and I are the same age. We've been, roughly as successful in our careers. And so it was nice to go out and just kind of see her put on a show. And it's the same with every city. I have a bunch of friends, a lot of people on staff at The Athletic who are big Swift fans too and have gone to shows. What she is doing in each city for a big swath of my life. I remember when Paul McCartney came here, and then there's been some big concerts. Nothing has even come close to rivaling like the interest and the excitement that those two shows she did in Cincinnati had, in terms of people lining up for her merch truck and people sitting outside the stadium. And it's been like that in every city. So it was kind of cool to go down, and it was a lot of like teenage girls screaming the entire 3-hour show. But I have 3 daughters, so I guess that's what I have to look forward to anyways. But it was definitely a good show and a fun time. And I apologize I wasn't able to make it on that night, but I was putting on the friendship bracelets and glitter and everything to get ready for the show.
Hey, understandable completely, and you heard it here first, Smokey. Justin Williams is the Taylor Swift of The Athletic.
Now you go. There you go. My favorite singer of all time, which is not even trying to compare it, but is because he's an incredible entertainer, was Elton John, or is Elton John, and he can go for hours. Like the rest of the band can leave, and he can still continue to play the piano, and that's kind of what I've heard, that she just goes and never stops. And I mean, you could talk about the money she makes the crowds, but she's an ultimate entertainer right now.
She is, and she puts on a great 3-hour show, and then you realize, like, wow, she has to wake up and do it again tomorrow, and then do it 100 other times based on all these tour dates she has. She can't really take a night off, because every time she does it, the people in the crowd, that's kind of their big moment. They want to come see it. So from that standpoint, from an entertainment, just dedication standpoint, it was pretty incredible.
So how much of a lift in the end will Texas and OU, who already recruited at an incredibly high level and are both doing just fine, and they'll get a bump and they have in some cases won some head-to-heads because of the SEC, but they did that a lot anyway. Who will get the biggest bump among those two entering the SEC?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think, when you talk to people around college football, like Texas, they're set up, right? They have everything you could possibly want from a location, from a resources, from a history standpoint, which is why it's been curious that it hasn't always, translated in the past couple of years onto the field. What was it? I know they're picked preseason number 1 in the Big 12 this year, and that's something that hadn't even happened for a while. Everyone in the Big 12 knows, how Texas has struggled based on, their standing and their resources. So, I on paper, I would think that it's going to be Texas who, if any of those teams are going to benefit from moving into the SEC a little bit more than they have in the past, I would pick Texas. But I don't know. It's kind of one of those things where, I'm like everyone else. I'd like to see Texas translated onto the field and have some success before I'm ready to crown them off of it.
Justin, great stuff. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Have a great week.
Anytime. Looking forward to seeing you guys in Jerry World for Big 12.
We will see you Wednesday and Thursday. Justin Williams, The Athletic. And did you hear the news today? And I wasn't going to catch him off guard, but the New York Times, which used to be the newspaper of record, am I right?
Yeah.
It depends on who you read. For the longest time with me, it was the Dallas Morning News. But the New York Times bought The Athletic for $500 or $600 million recently. And today they made the announcement that they are completely not laying off their sports staff, but they're no longer going to have a sports staff. Those others who are part of sports, if they want, can go cover other stories, whatever it might be, but not sports. And The Athletic will become their sports department.
Yeah, that felt like it was coming. I mean, it was weird.
It's another part of the media. We hear and talk about television or what ESPN's gone through or others.
Okay, so let me ask you this. As far as, and I think it's terrible, but it is awful. And so I hope that nobody winds up losing their job or losing their dream job, which for many would be working for the New York Times, because it has been such a prestigious newspaper over many years. But depending on, again, your opinion on things, but I mean, nobody can deny the skins on the wall that the Times has. But if you're the New York Times and you just bought The Athletic, and you need to have a day-to-day sports department, well, what do you cover at the New York Times? Day-to-day sports.
Yep.
You cover the Yankees. Well, The Athletic has Yankees beat writers, and they probably have more than one because it's the Yankees. They have the Giants. Well, The Athletic has that. They have the NHL teams. They have the NBA teams. So all that stuff that the New York Times is covering and putting in print normally is already covered by The Athletic, so that's a redundancy.
Yeah, the only thing is somebody asked here, so the New York Times, are they going to raise the price for The Athletic? Well, they've owned The Athletic, I think, a couple of years. The Athletic has not been in existence that long.
Yeah.
We know a bunch of, we had Bruce Feldman, a week or two ago. We have Max and Sam Kahn and Justin Williams, among many others who write, John Machota. I don't know. Right now, I've already seen the bump. I think it started out like $4, $5, $9 a month, and now I think it's at like 18 or 20. There's a point with me that I love the content, and then if it gets too high, I'm going to get a hold of the editor and go, hey, we have a lot of your writers on this show. I think everybody on this staff should get it for free. If it gets to that point where it starts to rise too far, and we won't stop having those analysts on, because if they do, outprice themselves.
I do think that something that would be nice for media people, that if we don't have the same accreditation we used to be, that you could, or media folks.
Oh, okay.
But if some of the associations that we're part of, we could get, we just had what do they call it? In-kind trade. So if somebody that worked for The Athletic wanted a Sikkim 365 subscription, we could give them that, because we'd have one as well.
Yeah, no, And that was the case back when there was really nobody covering high school football. Max Emfinger was it at the time, and Max would send me his newsletter. There was NFL draft guys. Max, Mel Kiper, who now is above the clouds where he is as far as being able to have any access, because I'm sure the demand is high. I would get the Mel Kiper stuff all the time in the mail. And then what happened is so many others started to do that, and then it just got to be the point where some got very, very huge nationally. Good for them along the way. All right, at 4 o'clock today, we're going to hear, we have a lot of guests lined up for today's show. And again, on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, hope you're a part of it. But Wyatt Thompson, voice of Kansas State, he'll join us at 4. Also, we'll have Matt Norlander. He wrote an article about, and I was going to ask this to Justin, but I don't think it's happened yet. He wrote an article, Matt Norlander with CBS, about college basketball recruiting, that if you're not a top 50 recruit in college basketball, maybe he said top 60 recruit, one of the quotes from a coach is, you're effed. Because of the COVID year, is there still one more year left of that for some? And then the transfer portal, that unless you are among the top 50 or 60 prospects, that you're kind of like in trouble. I can't imagine. Is that just for one more year, or is that now the trend? We'll have Matt on to discuss that today, plus Tim Brando, David Hellman, Paul's Top 5 today. Craig's back with us tomorrow, and live both days at Arlington AT&T Stadium, Big 12 Media Days. This is 365 Sports. IdealMRI.com and the Central Texas Marketplace. Dr. Rob Maxey and his partners have done a remarkable job of doing a couple of things that any patient would appreciate. One, their MRI machine is state-of-the-art, so you will get whatever images you want or your doctor wants of, let's say you may have a torn ligament in your knee, and I hope not. Maybe it's not a ligament, maybe it's meniscus, or something in your back that bothers you. I've mentioned this before, and it's kind of been my story in the last maybe year or so, but I've had a couple of impingements flare up, whether it's calcium or it's gotten the canal's not quite as, and I've had to get a couple of epidurals. It's not a great thing, but Ideal MRI was able to go in and look at my L3 and L4 and realize, nope, these things are tightening up. We need to, I'm not going to get back surgery unless it's the last thing I ever do. But they've given the doctors who have performed the epidurals and me a way to understand how I can try to stabilize my back. It's not fun. But that's what they do. The MRI machine will get the images you want, and then on top of that, the icing on the cake, $497 is the cost. $497 is the cost. It's the highest cost. It's the highest you'll ever pay, and sometimes less. IdealMRI.com in the Central Texas Marketplace off I-35 in Waco.
Cars priced right, both day and night. Average your car in Texas. Trucks built for you, red, white, and blue. Average your car in Texas. Cars that zoom with lots of room. Average your car in Texas. Count on us, a dealer to trust. Average your car in Waco, Texas.
Aaron Duvall, owner, Texas Beef House. Why did you get into this business?
We kind of were born into it, and it's been for several generations. Our family's been in the beef business, the ranching business, and we've specifically got into the beef business back in about 2015 when me and my son decided to form Texas Beef House and sell directly to the public.
Aaron, everyone knows about Wagyu and how elite that is when it comes to beef. What separates you from anyone else that may do this in this type profession?
We selected out Wagyu mainly because it's such a quality beef, and it's consistent. Some beef, some breeds, you may have a good animal every now and then, but Wagyu produces really consistently good beef every time.
Where is the best beef in Texas? Your house. When you order from Texas Beef House, unleash the flavor of Texas raised Wagyu from our pasture to your plate. TexasBeefHouse.com.
In the market for a quality metal building? Since 1943, Pioneer Steel & Pipe has helped Central Texas residential and commercial customers with metal building design, panel options, building components, and trim options. Pioneer Steel & Pipe's residential line is energy efficient, offers low maintenance, reduces insurance payments, is impact resistant, and carries up to a 45-year limited warranty. In addition, they can also help you find a metal building contractor for your project. Pioneer Steel & Pipe with locations in Waco and Bryan and at pioneersboys.com.
TFNB Your Bank for Life is the official local bank of Baylor Athletics. Find out why more Central Texas are making TFNB their bank for life. Sign up for our Edge checking and savings accounts to earn interest or cash back. With 5 convenient locations and an award-winning mobile app, banking has never been easier. TFNB, your bank for life. Member FDIC.
Waco Regional Tennis and Fitness on Lakeshore Drive is premier, elite, life-changing experience where you can change your mind, body, and soul. Waco Regional Tennis and Fitness offers over 40 group exercise classes each week, including boot camp, indoor cycling, and more. If you haven't been there in quite some time, you're missing out on the improvements for our members. New flooring in the weight room and locker room, new paint and mirrors added in the weight room and group exercise room, with more new machines arriving over the next few months. New free weights, weight machines, TRX, rowing machines, stationary bikes, new treadmills, new elliptical machines on spacious weight room floor. Personal training with Christy London, Randall Corley, and Alex Botch, where you will be encouraged and motivated to grow. There's sauna, whirlpool, tanning bed, and kids club. The amenities are great. 16 tennis courts plus an 1,100-seat stadium court, 8 pickleball courts, youth and adult tennis and pickleball lessons. Visit our website, wacotennis.com, or visit Waco Regional Tennis and Fitness on Lakeshore Drive in Waco.
This is 365 Sports. Text us at 254-339-1122. The text line is sponsored by Riverbend Liquor and Wine, with the most extensive variety of craft beer in Waco. A hidden gem on Lakeshore Drive and 19th Street.
The voice of Kansas State Athletics, Wyatt Thompson, joins us to start the 4 o'clock hour. Paul Catalina and David Smoak. Wyatt, thank you for your time. I saw something I think Scott Frensham put up when he said that a lot of players, Kansas State players this week at AT&T Stadium, Big 12 Media Days, will be asked what it's like to be picked number 2, but Kansas State doesn't play for second place, and last year, of course, they won it all. There is a quiet... I love what Bill Snyder did twice, the miracle of all in college football. But, man, I tell you what, Kleiman has done, and he seems to have everything kind of where you want it to be.
I love the guy. I'm just going to be honest. We were so fortunate to have basically 30 years of Bill Snyder, and what a blessing that was. But at the end of the day, you know, Coach Kleiman came in here, and I've said this in many interviews, guys. I don't mind saying it to you, too. He respected what Bill Snyder did, but was very confident in how he does things and really was himself from the get-go. And it was a little bit rocky through the COVID thing, but wasn't it for everybody? But I think what I would tell you is I think he's very similar to Bill Snyder in terms of just I guess I would say just the intangibles that make winning football happen, right? He recruits good guys. He's recruited a little bit better each time through the last 4 classes, which has certainly helped. I think they're very good in terms of player development here, and has a really good assistant staff right now. Colin Klein, our offensive coordinator, and Joe Klanderman, our defensive coordinator. I'll throw a couple of other guys out there. Our cornerbacks coach, Dan Malone, I think probably could be a head coach someday. And Connor Riley, our offensive line coach, does a great job. So there's a lot of strengths. And, you know, as opposed to the number 1 or number 2, I think they are confident, obviously. I think they just want to get out there and get it going and run it back, as they say now. So it's a good group of guys that can't wait to get started, frankly.
Wyatt, Will Howard really just took the bull by the horns last year when he was thrown in, and a guy whose first couple years of a career were as just a roller coaster as you could imagine, and didn't let it faze him, stepped up when he was ready, and got better each week, it seemed. How much has he even taken the jump now, knowing the job is his and that he is the leader of the team?
Fantastic question, and I think what you said was said perfectly, and here's what I mean by that. Will was thrown into the fire so early and way before he was ready, even as a true freshman, because of an injury early on in his true freshman year with Skylar Thompson, who's now with the Dolphins. And there were plenty of ups, but also plenty of downs. And I think all of us were impressed by how he handled that. He came into those press conferences on Tuesday afternoon,
and stood there and took all the bullets, all the questions, whatever you want to say, and never blinked and didn't worry about much other than getting better. And he's done that. I'll be honest with you, Coach Kleiman and Coach Klein told me way before he even took the field last year that he is a much, much, much better player, person, leader than anybody would recognize, even just outside the walls of our program, meaning the K-State fan base. And I think he proved that when they called on him at TCU last year. And even in a defeat, he did all he could, trust me, against a really good team. And then after that, late in the year, the team became his. And I think it surprised a lot of people when Coach Kleiman said that, but he meant it. And Will is absolutely one of the best football players on this team. And I don't think there's any doubt that from a leadership perspective, it is his football team, frankly.
Well, Baylor knows that because the game in Waco where Kansas State took the heart and soul of Baylor, 31-3. Martinez was there early. I think he got sacked early in the game. And then here comes Will Howard, and he just diced him up.
Well, you know, the thing about Will is that I think goes under the radar a little bit. And this happens in the game, right? I mean, I'm sure in Waco, you guys have had many players like this over the years with the Bears. You know, the guys are just naturally, they have good football acumen. You know what I'm saying? They're football smart. And there's nobody that I trust more than Colin Klein from his days as a player and through the GA thing and being an assistant and now an offensive coordinator. When he tells me Will Howard is a potential pro and he's everything that you hope for in a player, I'm going to listen. And I think it's proven out that Will is really a good player.
Wyatt,
at the end of the day, he's still just a guy. He just wants to be one of the guys. Does that make sense?
Yep.
You couldn't ask for more.
Sorry to interrupt you there. I apologize for that. But what is the feeling in Manhattan as this new Big 12 with one more year with Texas and Oklahoma congregates over the next couple of days, Wednesday, Thursday in Arlington?
You know what? That's a great question, too. And what I would tell you is I don't know that it's any different here than it is anywhere else around the league. And what I mean by that is when all of this shook down not that long ago, when Texas and Oklahoma announced they were leaving and all of that, and frankly, there were some hard feelings about it and should have been, I believe. But here we are now, all of this time later, and I think everybody around the league is excited about what those other four can at least potentially bring to the party. I think all of us understand that, you know, you look at a Cincinnati and they've won at a pretty big level. Houston has won at a pretty big level. And I think the one team that I think is already recruiting at maybe close to a Power 5 level is Central Florida. And I've had a lot of dealings in my past, back to my days at Colorado State with BYU. They will take advantage of being in this league, gang. I'm just telling you, they will, and they will get better, and they will compete. They have they've got a big time following nationally and internationally with the church, and they get good quality players. I'm excited about those four and what they bring to an already strong grouping. And I'll say this too. I'm sure you guys feel this each and every day. One thing that people missed when they talked about the league will die without Texas and Oklahoma, I'm not debating the fact it's hard to lose them and their national brand. But what people don't talk about and should is the fan bases in Manhattan and Ames and Lawrence and Waco and Lubbock and Stillwater that deeply, deeply care about their programs and are there to support them each and every week if they put a good product on the field, and sometimes even when they're just okay. You guys agree with that?
Yeah,
I think that's
absolutely. I think sometimes people look at college towns, and for some reason the Big 12 college towns are thought of as smaller than everybody else, and yet Lubbock's got over 300,000 and others. Yep. But it's the passion, and I understand there's the SEC in the South and Southeast, the passion, but there is something about the fan bases in the Big 12. You're right. Some struggle at times. Kansas football for the longest time, Baylor for the longest time before Bryles got them turned around. But you're exactly right. They are locked in. They are loyal. And they're waiting for that opportunity to enjoy something, and I think you hit that on the nail on the head.
Well, I just appreciate the fan bases in this league, and you said that well in my mind, because I think you have to compare apples to apples. And if you're going to say Mississippi or Mississippi State, or name the team this side of Alabama, LSU, maybe, are you kidding me? Every team in this league can compete with those types of teams, and they've proven that they have. Period. End of story. It's just a fact.
We're having Wyatt Thompson. He's on the show right now, the voice of Kansas State Athletics. By the way, a couple of K-State fans in Wichita saying they would not have missed the segment with you on the show. Wyatt Thompson with us on 365 Sports.
Wyatt, as someone who's been through a lot of college towns doing this job as long as you have, one of the things I've kind of always contended, because some people say, oh, players will never go here or players will never go there. Well, as college football changes and then the advantages changes, look, the big dogs are always going to be the big dogs and they're always going to have money, unless they're, everybody goes bankrupt at Georgia. They're always going to have money. Sure. But as far as college towns to college towns recruiting and getting players, it's about the guy in charge, because outside of like maybe 7 or 8 cities that colleges could be in, most college towns are almost exactly the same.
Yep. That's perfectly said. And that goes back to what I was trying to say before. Look, I'm not anti-SEC. What I'm trying to say is that the SEC is a really good football league, but it's top-heavy and has been for a long, long time. I think in our league, you see more balance. Has it been dominated mostly by Texas and Oklahoma? Sure. But I think if you look at it fairly, and you look at the last, just in my time at K-State, I go back to 2002. K-State has won 3 Big 12 championships in that time. Baylor's won. Oklahoma State's won. There are teams out here that compete. When you start really comparing players, I have no problem with stacking some of the guys that I've seen in the last 21 years against anybody. Do we have as many as Alabama, Georgia, LSU? No, but we've had our kind of guys like a Deuce Vaughn, a Darren Sproles, a Jordy Nelson, a Terrence Newman. I'm not going to keep going. You guys understand what I'm saying, and that's also true in Waco and Stillwater and all of those other places that I mentioned. I just think it's undervalued. It isn't our fault in this league that some of these markets are smaller, but so is some of the others in the SEC. They are what they are.
Yep.
I just don't see the difference like other people look at it. I just don't.
I think one of the things that needs to happen, and very rarely lately has it happened, is when a Big 12 school plays an SEC school, whether it's a bowl game or a non-conference game, that there's success. That it's not the exception, but there needs to be a few scalps taken, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and I think last year's probably a pretty good example of that. You know what? K-State played for almost the entire first half. They played with Alabama. Did Alabama get away from them in the second half? They did. And you got to give them credit for that. They are what they are. I look at those guys, and I'm just being honest about this too. And I get how good the league is at the top. I've mentioned that earlier with the SEC, but they lost 2 heartbreaking games, and that's really the only thing that separates them from the others, correct? I mean, Alabama was absolutely as good as most of the rest of those teams in the league, just like they always are. That's what and then this is how things go. And I guess I'll say this to just let people think about the point I'm trying to make. When I went to the press conferences for Alabama at the bowl game at the Sugar Bowl, one of the very first questions is how have your guys dealt with the disappointment of being in this game? Really? They're in the Sugar Bowl. Let's keep perspective here what Alabama was before Nick Saban. And he is not, let me say that again, he is not going to be there forever. Nebraska won forever. Texas has won forever. But you know what, guys? This is driven by coaches. Kirby Smart. Is Georgia going to be the same when he leaves? Maybe, maybe not. I think that's what the other thing that people miss. And there's good coaching in this league. I'm convinced of it and always have been.
Wyatt, great stuff. We'll see you, Wednesday? Which day will you be there, one or both?
Well, I'm going to be there both. I can't wait to get to know my new guys, play-by-play guys, a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
I've known Greg Wrubell at BYU forever, but those other guys, I want to kind of hang with them a little bit. And I love being there the whole time, man. So Stan and I are going to do that. Look forward to seeing you guys.
If you don't mind, when Gene Taylor has been with us, I mean, he's been on the show, I think 3 to 5 times since the fall of 2021 when the summer of 2021 when all hell appeared to break loose. And he was honest. He and Iowa State, Jamie Pollard, Matt Rhodes, who joins us almost weekly, that they were like sick to their stomach because they really did not know. Did you have that same feeling like a lot of people did when that went down, similar to what happened in the early parts of 2010 decade when 4 schools left the Big 12 and like, what's going to happen here?
Oh, sure. There's a guy in our fan base that lives here in Manhattan who's one of our most diehard fans. He still teases me about the look on my face when I found out. I mean, it was a sickening feeling. And yet, as we've gone through that and other change, things are going to be okay. I think what people have found out through this is that Big 12 football is a good product. It is a good television product too. Numbers are going to point that out. People are watching Big 12 football now, and they just are, and they should. It's a great product. I'm really happy and proud of what the league has done. But I'm also excited about the future. And you know what, guys? Those 3 guys you named, and there are others in this league, kind of starts at the top with those leadership guys, too. And we have really good ones in our league that way, too.
So how good is the transfer from Florida State, the running back, as they try to replace a Deuce Vaughn? Yes.
Well, he's not Deuce.
No.
But you know what? Everybody, when Deuce walked in here, everybody wanted to compare him to Darren, and I said, Darren Sproles, and I don't compare anybody to Darren Sproles. But with that said, Deuce Vaughn made his way, and I think Trayshawn will too. He's not going to be here as long, but he is a really talented kid. I think in unison with he and DJ Giddens, who served last year as the primary backup, K-State is in fine shape there. Would they prefer to have Deuce back for his senior year? Of course.
Sure.
But they'll survive. And they'll survive because those guys can play. They've got their entire offensive line back. They've got Will Howard back, Phillip Brooks back. This is a really quality football team, and I'm excited about it.
Do you think, and I know I'm like extending this thing. I'm sorry. That's what okay. I do. Do you think K-State, which is kind of like they just hum along, is there going to be any kind of like, we have all these people back. We won this thing last year, and yet we're still not picked to win it this year.
Yeah, there's some of that, but I think that's true about every year, if I'm being honest about it.
Sure.
And I get why. I totally understand why Texas is picked, even though K-State won the championship against TCU last year. It also amazes me that not a lot of people are talking about a TCU and what they did last year. And I get the way it ended. They got smashed by Georgia. I understand that. But they had a really, really great story all year long with that quarterback and that coach. That was incredible. And I'm a believer they're going to be pretty good again. And I just think, you look what Baylor was 2 years ago as opposed to last year. Which one do you think they're going to be more like? I would lean more towards 2 years ago than last year. Could I be proven wrong? Sure. But I'm gonna go on the side of I think I have a pretty good feel for what Dave Aranda is through my relationship with Chris Kleiman, and he tells me he's really good, and I think they'll bounce back as one example. I think Tech is really making its way. Oklahoma State will be better. They don't have many years like they did last year, and they'll get decent quarterback play this year, don't you think?
Yeah, no,
I do.
Yeah. With Bowman, I think they just need to kind of like help him make it a little bit easier for him. He's a gunslinger. Right. He wants to toss it all over the place coming out of that Tech system where he started his college career.
Yeah, so I think the league is strong, and I can't wait, guys. I'm excited to get to Dallas, even though Is it still 100 degrees down your way?
No, it's 104. It's don't just hey don't act like it's not 104. And then of course you add the humidity.
But the good news is it's a wet heat.
Yes.
So
there you go.
It's a humid heat. Hey, Wyatt, great stuff. Look forward to seeing you. When I see you there, I'll come up and shake your hand. We can't wait to see what happens. It's great that really almost like launching the football season starting Wednesday with the new Big 12. And thanks for your time today.
My pleasure, fellas. Great talking to you. We'll see you Wednesday.
The voice of K-State Athletics, Wyatt Thompson, with a lot of great nuggets. And again, he's not saying that the top of the SEC or the top of the Big 12 is equal to the top of the SEC. What he is saying at times is the top of the SEC, with all due respect to 6, 7, 8, or 7, 8, 9, that they can be so good that sometimes it's like, oh, well, everybody in the conference is good.
Well, if you remember after the national championship game, I created one of my first and only Twitter firestorms by saying, look, this is not about everybody's going to say this, and look how much better the SEC is than the Big 12. Ari Wasserman really, and I disagreed on this completely, but this is about Alabama and now Georgia being that much better than not just the Big 12, but everyone else, except for maybe Ohio State, who really, a field goal, and we're not talking about Georgia and their storied run. We're talking about TCU and Ohio State in a completely different game. But we're talking about Georgia and Alabama have cornered the market on year in and year out being elite. They don't have great drop-offs.
I looked at if you don't mind, I'll interject this because it validates what you're saying, or at least it helps. I looked at the very, 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 very early 2024 NFL draft, like the projections, and there's like 8 or 10 guys from both of those schools on it.
Yeah. So
already.
Yeah. And you get that. So that's where they are. And so if you take that out, then you're talking about short little flare-ups from every other team in the SEC they've had their runs, which makes the league better because they are, as a collective group, able to grab the top of the talent more than the other conferences have. But to say that Florida today is better than Kansas State today is insane. Like, it's not how it's working. So you have to look at, I think, everything as a whole. So the middle of the SEC, the middle of the Big 12, the middle of the Pac-12, and the middle of the Big 10 and all that stuff is all pretty much the same. The difference is the tippy top of the SEC is better than the tippy top of whoever the next best would be every year.
It also doesn't hurt, and this is not to question it, but it doesn't hurt when you have 4 or 5 teams ranked in the preseason top 10. Garrett, am I right? Because here's what's happened. And in a lot of ways, it makes sense. But what happens is, because there are other schools that play football pretty well in that conference, is that if you beat one of those teams in the top 5 or 10, you launch highly, and the ones in the 10 barely drop. And then you just kind of watch that. It's the way it is. And
every year?
Yeah.
Every year it's
pretty
like
much that way. And what did I call that, Paul? The SEC bubble. They've created that, have earned it. But a lot of times, if a Mississippi State beats somebody early, that Mississippi State's out of the top 25 and an SEC team's ranked 5th, and Mississippi State beats them, which is good, if that's great, they move up to like 13 or 15, and the team in the top 10 might drop 3, even though they lost to an unranked team. And in the end, we'll just see what the attrition might be like in the end.
Yeah, and look, I think... I say Alabama and Georgia. I think LSU deserves a little bit of credit here.
Absolutely, they're in that conversation.
And that they've been able to navigate 3 coaches and win, 3 coaches and win national titles, and maybe now a 4th. So the LSU's only problem, to me, honestly, appears to be administration is a little bit has been chaotic.
Yeah, the AD, he's a big. He goes after the big fish.
But even before him, like the reason that Les, like the through line from Les, or I guess it would be from Saban to Les to Edo and now to Brian Kelly. Like the difference between those times is like Saban and Brian Kelly now have administrators that have both had that here's our goal, and then in the middle of that, it got much like the state politics of Louisiana, the the university was kind of run like that, where everything's just chaotic. And
think about the coaches you just mentioned, though. They all won.
Yeah,
they all won. Yeah.
Brian Kelly's trying to get in that fraternity,
doing it quickly. He might do it quickly.
Exactly.
They beat Florida State early in Orlando.
Yeah,
I mean that doesn't mean it will be anything easy, but man, we saw what happened last year. That crazy finish last year when everyone started going, "Oh, Kelly," and laughing at him. Well, they bounced back. That was a lot of resiliency. Where we need to move on, but they showed a lot of resiliency. That game could have sent them into a spiral, and it did not. They ended up, of course, winning the game with Alabama. Did they beat Tennessee? Did they play? They didn't play Tennessee. They did not play Tennessee. Yeah. Alabama lost in the last second to LSU and Tennessee. All right, the chat room is rolling along. We have a lot more to get to. We have a couple other nuggets when it comes to sports, college football, and others in this next segment. At 4:40, Matt Norlander from CBS Sports and how high school recruiting and men's basketball has changed dramatically because of the COVID year and the transfer portal. This is 365 Sports. Waco Custom Marketplace, 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco. I walked in the door the other day, and I have pretty much what I need when it comes to the product, as far as when it comes to steak and chicken and what I need when it comes to that, the protein. But I walked in the other day. I said, I'm going to go buy it, and I ended up spending about $50 because they have a grocery store personality. It's not. And the part about it that a lot of people love is that the full-service butcher shop and a full-service bakery. But they have cold beer, cold wine. So it's almost like it's a grocery store, convenience store, and then the butcher shop kind of combination. It's the old-fashioned of what you had back in the day. And so I just needed a couple of things, but able to get it. They have fresh vegetables if you want corn or broccoli or asparagus, if that's what you want. And I tell you what, they have absolutely fantastic seafood, lobster tails, a live lobster tail tank, a live lobster tank, and then on top of that, if you want tilapia, if you want catfish, if you want crab claws, they have all of that available for you at Waco Custom Marketplace at 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco.
The future's bright, the time is now.
College is what you make it. It's a late night pizza run and all-nighters coding a new project. It's having big dreams and making them a reality. It's a professor who knows your name and your story. It's preparation for your future, your calling, your life. And at Baylor, it's even more. Baylor, where lights shine bright.
Don's Humidor, your home with a 48-foot walk-in humidor with the elite cigar brands from around the world, including the #1 cigar of the year, Aging Room Cuatro Nicaragua. Plus, they have the great brands like Macanudo and Artur Fuente, Rocky Patel, Aston, and so much more. CBD, great for sore muscles, aches and pains, sleep, Vita Dreams, and anxiety, mild depression, general health and wellness. Their staff very knowledgeable on the subject. If anyone is curious about CBD, ask Carol and Ashley. Don's Humidor in the Townwest Shopping Center off Valley Mills in Waco.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be part of the Waco community. We're a small family business here in Central Texas. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important. And unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. And that's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through this difficult time. So if you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. You can schedule online in minutes at idealmri.com or call 833-IDEAL-MRI.
Petty Clinic Men's Healthcare in Woodway is now proud to offer you men an exceptional weight management body sculpting product called semaglutide, also known as Ozempic or Wegovy. Semaglutide is an FDA-approved weight management medication. Once-a-week injections of this powerful medication offers an average body fat weight loss of 20% within the first year of treatment. In addition to body sculpting, semaglutide also normalizes blood sugars and has the clinical research proof of reducing blood pressure, cholesterol, stroke, and heart attack risk. If you're like most men and you have stubborn fat that will just not respond to typical diets and exercise, then help is finally here. Semaglutide. Affordable, highly effective. Google search Petty Clinic Waco and reach out to the Petty Clinic team today for a free consultation with Dr. Petty to see if semaglutide is right for you. Go to pettycliniclowt.com.
After my first car accident, I feared the biggest damage would be to my wallet. I expected a mountain of bills and a long, drawn-out process. But my Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent was there when I needed her and helped me get back on my feet and in my car in no time. Instead of a hassle, I got reassurance and a quick recovery.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
There are 26 letters in the alphabet, over 600,000 words in the dictionary, and just 3 of them said together can change everything. Let's order pizza. Those 3 words lead to dough made from scratch and 3 fresh signature cheeses that blanket golden crust in a heavenly melt on Marco's Pizza that'll blow your mind. So visit marcos.com to order and stop by Marco's Pizza in Belmead, China Spring, Woodway, and in Robinson. Marco's. Pizza lovers get it.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 4 o'clock hour is sponsored by Boozer's Jewelers, the wedding ring store, specializing in custom jewelry and repair, all in-house.
Now here's David Smoak and Paul Catalina.
A couple of notes. TheAthletic.com is running a series called The Play Callers, and it's focused around Shanahan, McVay, Matt LaFleur, and some of the younger head coaches who have become known as these brainiacs. And we do put labels on these hot young coaches. And of course, McVay, they've won a Super Bowl. Shanahan's been really good no matter who the quarterback has been. And LaFleur with Green Bay's had success, although kind of a rocky relationship with Aaron Rodgers, who's now with the Jets. So one of the background here is that, Paul, do you realize that at one time, Washington with Mike Shanahan on their staff at one time, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, Mike McDaniel, and Raheem Morris once worked together as young assistants in Washington. And now they're spread out all over the place. So RG3's rookie year started off, I think they were 3-5, and then Garrett, as you remember, they took off. They had an off week, and then they had Alfred Morris and RG3, who was fantastic in the opening game against the Saints. But then he got hurt against Baltimore when it looked like his knee looked like Willie McGinnis when his knee just went fluid. Came back. And there's always been this question, did Washington force him back? Did Dr. Andrews misdiagnose something? How much of this was RG3? In the story about his injury, Robert, here's a quote about why he played at the end of the year. He shouldn't have been playing. And this is a really cool because there was a lot of veterans on that team that eventually turned on him. A lot of it was former players who turned on him because of he was getting preferential treatment or whatever. There was a lot of silliness going on. It was jealousy. The only reason I played through that injury was because I was trying not to let those guys down, Griffin said. Chris Cooley, I didn't want to let him down. London Fletcher, Santana Moss. I knew that they were at the end of their careers, and this is an opportunity for them to win a ring on a team that was hot at the time. So that part, it has always been tough. Every time I see London, I get that feeling like, dang, man, I let the old vet down. And as you know, you never want players to feel that way. But we're human. We all want to play. And that's kind of something that kind of sticks with me. I want everyone to know that I played through that injury for my teammates. And there were thoughts that RG3 was very selfish and at times probably got caught up in that. All right? But he got blasted a lot. That organization, Shanahan turned on him among some others. I don't know about Bruce Allen because God knows what he was doing. But that's the first time we've had him on many times. I think he's kind of discussed that a little bit with us. But how can you ever be upset with somebody who's playing through pain because he wants to help maybe the older players get one more shot? That team was not going to win a Super Bowl, but had he remained healthy, they were getting hot and were hot when they hit the playoffs and eventually lost in the postseason to Seattle. And RG3 went down in that game like a sack of potatoes.
I think one thing that sticks out with me watching him during his time at Washington, where I was like, they really don't care about him. They were playing the Steelers, and they did this play where they sent him out on a pass, and they threw the ball like at the sideline. Well, Griffin was going down the field as like receiver, and like Taylor took his head off on the sideline. I was like, well, yeah, they definitely do not value him as a quarterback here.
It reminds me of the throwback play, Oklahoma and Texas Tech. A throwback to Dylan Gabriel when they went into overtime. It was a throwback, and he got smoked on the play and never came back, never played, and Tech won the game. That's not why Tech won the game, but it was like, what are you doing? Now, if it works and he scores and you're up, okay, interesting. But, he took a hell of a lot of criticism, RG3, in Washington. And then you started seeing stories leaking out, and it was always the thought that maybe Mike Shanahan was not a fan of his. That RG3 being drafted by Washington was a Daniel Snyder pick. It was a right pick had he been protected or had they taken care of him better. But, of course, that organization can't ever do anything right.
No, and what happened to RG3 is that obviously the injury, that was A, the most devastating thing, and B was you have to know that when you trade up to get somebody, you're trading away the guys who are going to make that guy also better down the line. So you have to make sure that when you do that, for example, Houston trading up this year to get those 2 back-to-back picks.
Right.
It was a smart move for Houston this year because they had the picks to give. Washington, they had extra picks. They'd been building that up. They'd been going for a while. Dan Snyder was trying to make his Herschel Walker trade without having the picks. He didn't have those in his back pocket to move up. He just traded future picks. So then they go through years where now they have less picks, and not less picks because, we have one less pick because there was a throw-in on this. But they didn't have any of that. They didn't have those picks to move up because they didn't spend time breaking their team down to the rivets like the Texans have and then building back up and getting those draft picks. The Texans did that, and that's why they were able to do that this year. And again, they may not pay off for them, but it's a smarter move to do when you have somebody else's pick that you're trading for it. The Eagles did it, but the Redskins at the time, they just said, we're just going to trade these picks and move up. And then, okay, well, even say he doesn't get hurt. You're still running a risky game where you don't have a first-round pick and a third-round pick the next year, and those guys would be probably key parts of.
Here's the deal. Here's the other thing. Washington had the 6th overall pick. So they needed to, if they wanted to get RG3, they had to move up at least to 2, 3, or 4. They had the number 6 pick. So to move up 4 spots, they flipped 2 and 6. The Rams, as you mentioned, Paul, they got the number 39 pick, Washington's 2nd-round pick, which is usually a good player, and 2 future first-round picks. For a guy that lasted only a handful of years, gave them a surge of momentum that they have not really had in the last 20-something years. I think Joe Gibbs had 1 year when he came back the second time. But you flip the 6th pick. The Rams drop down to 6, probably end up with the player they wanted to get anyway, and get 2 extra first-round picks and that same year a 2nd-round pick. Those trades rarely ever work. And the Cowboys, of course, were one that just pillaged Minnesota with the Herschel Walker pick. Washington did win one trade one time with the Saints. Wasn't it with the Saints? When the Saints wanted, who was that, Garrett? The Saints moved up to get, was it Ricky Williams? They moved, Washington got a bucket load, but there's a story. It's a pretty good feature right now on theathletic.com when it comes to the play callers is the name of the feature. Now, a couple of basketball notes, and Matt Norlander's next, so we'll do this now. Baylor added a junior college big man, Giannis Najunga. He's a junior college player at New Mexico Military Institute. That's the same conference that was with Midland and Odessa and Hill and McLennan, which is in Waco, McLennan College. So they pick up a big man inside. Not sure about whether he's ready to play right now, but 14 points, 8 rebounds, big body. Kind of a power forward type that Baylor gets, a 6'8" freshman who played for New Mexico Institute last year. And then also I mentioned the Baylor women home and home with Oregon starting during the end of this year in December. They'll play in Waco. The following year, they'll make the trip to Eugene. The men, Oregon and also Baylor have played before. And when Baylor won the national title in 19, yes, they won in Tampa. In the semifinals, they beat INSQ in Oregon in the semifinal game before beating Notre Dame in the national championship game the 2 days later. When we come back, Matt Norlander, has college basketball recruiting for high school players changed dramatically because of the COVID year and the transfer portal? He is next, and this is 365 Sports.
It takes time to reach goals. It's a truth that applies to more than sports. It goes for your financial goals as well. You work hard for your money, and you deserve an investment strategy that lines up with your game plan. And Chuck Verno, your Edward Jones financial advisor, can help. If financial investments aren't putting forth the effort you desire, stop by today for a financial review. Chuck Verno, 720 North 64th Street in Waco, 254-732-1161. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
Camille Johnson Realtors guide you seamlessly through the process of buying your dream home or selling your current one. Commercial, farm and ranch, or residential, Camille Johnson Realtors can smoothly and successfully lead you through any transaction. With a team of 28 experienced agents who are excited about serving you, Camille Johnson Realtors services the entire greater Waco area. If you're in the market to buy or sell, contact Camille Johnson Realtors, 104 Midway Center in Woodway, or find them online at www.camillejohnson.com. Camille Johnson Realtors, elegant, charming, warm. Welcome home.
Stepping into the boots of a U.S. Army officer can add confidence and leadership skills to your son or daughter's career path. See all the things they can achieve in our boots at GoArmy.com. U.S. Army Waco Recruiting Company, 254-598-8131 or 254-776-1543.
Established in 2007 and independently owned, Alliance Bank Central Texas is committed to helping families and businesses meet their financial goals. From their tellers to their board of directors, they know the importance of superior service and competitive products. Customers have confidence knowing that their financial needs are in good hands. It's your bank, Alliance Bank Central Texas, with 2 Waco locations, 4721 Bosque Boulevard and 191 Archway Drive on Highway 84, and at AllianceBankTexas.com. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Do you or your kids get nervous about going to the dentist? Stonewood Dental, Dr. Steve Childress, he can help.
I've spent a career taking care of patients who as children had bad experiences, and now they're adults that hate going to the dentist. If I get a kid at 3 years old and they come every 6 months and it's a happy experience, it's normal for them. Now they have an accident at 6 or 7 or 8 at school. Now they have a broken tooth or a trauma. And they have to come here. They're used to lights. They're used to water in their mouth. They're used to experience. They already trust us. It's amazing what we can do with that kid without it being a negative thing. But if I see a 6 or 7 or 8 year old that's never been to the dentist, and now they have a trauma or an unfortunate unexpected toothache, it's harder to do that for that kid and it not be somewhat of a negative experience. So bottom line is I try to teach kids and adults and teenagers and everybody the way I'd want my family treated, which is where it's a necessary part of life. You just take care of it. It doesn't have to be that big a deal.
Learn more, stonewood-dental.com.
Shorty's Pizza Shack at 12th and Bagby is a homegrown, locally owned pizza place that's out of this world. Everything from the dough, the sauce, the sausage topping is made fresh in-house. Not to mention the amazing pizza pillows, the chicken wings are to die for. Try the Sikkim sauce, chili cheese fries or tots, plus great specials on food and drink every single day. Shorty's is also the perfect spot to watch the game with your friends. Shorty's Pizza Shack at 12th and Bagby. Tell them Paul sent you by.
This is 365 Sports. Text us at 254-339-1122. The text line is sponsored by Riverbend Liquor and Wine, with the most extensive variety of craft beer in Waco. A hidden gem on Lakeshore Drive and 19th Street.
Always respected the coverage of basketball. Many things with Matt Norlander, CBS Sports. He had a story that caught my attention, read the whole thing. How transfer portal, NIL, reshaping college basketball recruiting has dropped the value of high school prospects. And Matt joins Paul Catalina, David Smoak here on 365 Sports. Matt, thank you very much for your time, and I'm sorry to interrupt that dinner with your children. I hate that, but I do appreciate you finding time for us. So is it the transfer portal, or is it maybe even one more year left for some with COVID year? Is that affecting what's happening with high school prospects?
There's a lot going on. Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it. And kids actually just finished the dinner. Wife and I are we're gonna sit down once this radio interview is over, so it's all good.
Good, thank you.
So there's a lot going on. So yeah, I went out to a few of the recruiting things in June, which I'm sure some of your listeners are aware. But real quick, in June, the Baylor staff and all college coaching staff, they went and watched their recruiting targets play with their high school teams. So the people that they spend most of the year with, they saw them in that environment, which is a good environment, but a different environment because you're with the guys most. You're going to probably play truest to your role. In July, they're playing on the shoe circuit, which they also play in April, and that's with the most talent around them and against the best high school talent in the country. And as I went out in June, I just kind of took stock of what I was seeing at a couple of different events. The coaches were not there in the same numbers as they had been in many previous years. And, getting to talking to a couple of coaches, it just became clear that due to a number of factors, and with a number of pieces of evidence that were obvious, one of them being that many high major programs are not filling up all scholarships on their rosters. It indicated to me that the high school recruit is not valued now the way that they were 3 years ago, and definitely not a decade plus ago. And the biggest factors for this are, one, yes, we have the bonus COVID year. So we have 2 more seasons where college players are able to get an extra year of eligibility. And because of that, yes, the overwhelming majority of those players are staying in college. And there is a value to a 22-year-old man versus an 18-year-old guy just out of high school, clearly. And that combined with the transfer portal truly going mainstream a couple of years ago. And, oh, by the way, with all of this name, image, and likeness legislation then creating a market wherein many players are seeking a lot of money for going into the portal, going to a new spot. It has created a volatile set of circumstances with recruiting and the portal. And because of all of this, high school players, I'm not talking about guys ranked 1 through 20 in the rankings. I'm not talking about the guys that could be one and doneers or some of the best other freshmen to be in the country. I'm talking about everyone else. Those players, while they are obviously still being recruited, there is an anticipation that those guys will mean less to a roster than we have seen in literally decades. You might even have to go back to the 1980s when the last time we had freshmen that were basically looked at as contributing pieces, bit pieces on a roster. And so the question in the piece is, are we just in a passing phase right now? Will this bob back up a little bit in 2 years once that bonus COVID year isn't there? It could. There's some wandering curiosity if there might eventually, I'm not saying this is in the works or it'll happen, but wandering curiosity, will there eventually be a permanent situation where guys get 5 years of eligibility? I would argue it's actually good for college basketball to keep it as old as possible, to have familiar names, and you'll have better play, but we'll see if we ever get there. If we don't, does it bob back up? Or will we be in the situation where this year the portal had more than 1,800 names in it? Will it be, 1,500 plus? And if that's the case, will we just see the freshman that is wanting to step in and be a factor just not have that much impact? Because one other thing here, I know I'm going long, but it's a very complex issue. The thing is, if you are a 4-star freshman, right, you're pretty highly touted. If you're a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, you have been recruited by a number of high major programs, and you have been, for 1, 2, 3 years, you have been chased. Like you feel good about your prospects, and rightfully so. You probably have a pretty healthy ego. But if you are a 4-star recruit, guess what? When you step in, I mean, there's a chance you might start maybe, but you're not going to be the best. You're not going to be option 1. You're not going to be option 2, and you're probably not going to be option 3. And so, since this is a two-way street, because many times these recruits that are ranked anywhere from 20 to 200, they want to have more of a role in their first year. And whereas previously they had to suck it up or risk sitting out a year of transferring, now they're just like, nah, man, 17 minutes a game is not going to cut it for me. I'm going to hop in the portal after a year. And so because of that, they have reduced their value, because of their own behaviors. And yes, coaches are at fault for this as well. Very interesting situation we find ourselves in 2023.
So if you're a player ranked 60 to 80 or so, or 90 in the top 100 of recruits, what do you do now? Do JUCO somehow have a renaissance here because this might be the best option for these guys?
Good question. I don't know if there's going to be a renaissance with that. And to be clear, like these players that are like, take the 80th ranked player, like you're going to a power conference unless, there's a special circumstance where maybe like a mid-major plus, as we call it, or, a team from a multi-bid league, like an A-10 school, Mountain West school. Like, occasionally those kind of guys will go to those schools, and I get that. Those players are they need to be accepting when they get to college, and a lot of this has to do with their own, the own conversations they have with their parents and their coaches and their advisors, and then the coaches at these programs to be as honest as possible in the recruitment process, because so many coaches, they want to be as old as possible because, and listen, we watch the games, we love the games, but to hear it from the coaching side, like, yeah, unless the talent is like super special, you just straight up want to be putting out as many 21, 22, and yes, 23-year-olds. I mean, there will be 25-year-olds playing college basketball this season.
Mm-hmm.
That's like Javon Quinterly is going to play this season almost certainly for Memphis, and he's 25. Like, he would go up against an 18-year-old. That's a massive difference, massive. And so, yeah, we could see a little bit of a renaissance with the JUCO, but it is an adjustment period, and I don't know how long it's gonna last, and if this is going to be the new normal or not.
How has this affected Calipari, who used to come in with 5 or 6 elite freshmen, high-ranked, best class every year? Has he changed his mind too?
Yes and no. So Calipari is quoted in the piece, and he is bringing in 5 highly touted freshmen. So that is happening again. All right, we are going to see that. Now, at one point, Calipari only had 7 scholarship players, and at one point, I mean like a month ago, okay? It was unthinkable to ever think that Kentucky would be in a spot where it had barely more than half of its allotted scholarships filled. Now he has been able to add some pieces in the portal, and he does have some experience there. Kentucky's situation in general is fascinating because the program has been all over the place over the past few years, and the fan base is certainly agitated because you're Cal. Like, there's an expectation that you're going to be able to not just be relevant November to March, but then, make deep runs in the tournament. I think he has tweaked it some. And to be clear, because I did talk to John Shire for this, he's not quoted in the piece, but like coaches like at Duke and Kentucky most specifically, but, of course, the Blue Bloods, North Carolina, Kansas, even like a quasi blue blood like in Arizona, if they are able to recruit and get players ranked 1 to 15, 1 to 20, obviously you're going to take that. The talent there is so good. So he has probably modified it a little bit, but I would say it's not a major overhaul. When you watch Kentucky next season, you are going to see a lot of babyface newbies that are new to the sport, and that's led by 2 players, DJ Wagner, the former number 1 player in his class, and Rob Dillingham, who could be a big-time scorer as a freshman.
Do you think this will – I mean, we had the wild Final Four last year that even though UConn, who's a blue blood, won, they came out of – they weren't in 1 seed this year. Do you think we'll see more of that down the line because of all this?
It's possible. Like, there's a lot of different factors that go into what makes a national champion, and they aren't the same from year to year. But last season, I mean, UConn was a quality team much of the year that put it together. It wound up having a first round draft pick come off the bench, and that player is now returning, like Donovan Clingan.
Mm-hmm.
But last year, like Adama Sanogo, the Final Four MVP, he was one of the 3 best players in his conference for 2 straight seasons, and one of the best bigs in all of college basketball. You had a veteran transfer, Tristan Newton, who's returning this season. You had a lottery pick and one of the best shooters in the sport, Jordan Hawkins. You had maybe the best, I think the most multidimensional player, even if he wasn't a great shooter, and maybe the best athlete in the sport, in Andre Jackson. And like guys that played above their experience, like Alex Caravan, who was an older freshman there. So I think it's more likely than not. Like we'll see what happens in the year and the season to come here. Kansas is expected to be good. Purdue returns the National Player of the Year, but I am not. I'll tell you this: I am not anticipating that we'll have a national champion in college basketball that relies on how do I want to phrase this? I don't think for the next half decade we'll get a team that wins the title and they will have more than one freshman be one of their 4 most important players. You see what I'm saying? Like,
yep.
And they might have 2 freshmen starting in their top 5, maybe here and there, but I bet you that second freshman is the 5th best player. I just don't think that's the way it's going to happen anymore, at least in the short term, especially with the fact that last season college basketball literally statistically was never older than it was. This year will be similar to that. And so those teams, that's going to rise up. And also we're coming off a year where it was one of the weaker freshman classes collectively. Like we did have good freshmen, don't get me wrong. Brandon Miller was obviously, all the controversy aside, was a tremendous player. But you look around last season, the best players were Zach Edey, Trace Jackson Davis, Jaime Jaquez, a senior, Drew Timme, a senior, Jalen Wilson, a senior, Adama Sanogo, a junior, Jalen Pickett, Azuolas Tubelis, like up and down the roster, it was just experienced players. I think we're going to still see a lot more of that.
Well, and Baylor won the national title. They had guys return from that team, but that was an older team with Vital and obviously Paul just went blank with Teague, with Butler, with Davion Mitchell. I mean, that was a team that was kind of, in fact, I think somebody that played in the tournament said those are some grown-ass men, excuse my language, that we played up against, and they were. And so you also, I get confused sometimes, as you mentioned, the high school prospects and who they're playing for or when. And I know that Baylor has the commitment from Robert Wright, heard a lot of great things about what he's done lately. What have you seen from Robert Wright and the number 1 overall player, Baylor's involved in this possibly in the end too, along with others, Trey Johnson, and how good he is?
I'll start with Robert Wright, who I saw play. He played the John Lucas team on Friday. That was an awesome game. And Robert Wright's team's final team won. Wright hit the 2 foul shots. I want to say they were funny. Scott Drew was on the other side of the gym, so he was basically like right next to Wright when he was shooting this. I want to say his team was down 1 when he went to the line with like 2 seconds to go. He sank both, and they won. I think that's what happened. It's something like that. He was terrific in the game. It's very, very poised, opportunistic. Not an outstanding shooter, at least in that game. And again, I want to be clear about this. I'm not a recruit, Nick. I go to a few recruiting events. I like to see some of the 5 stars. Occasionally a 4-star or an unknown guy will catch my eye. But it was impossible for Robert Wright not to stand out in that particular game. I thought he was really, really good. And he's a good commit. Trey Johnson's talent is undeniable. And I know he's being pushed here and recruited by a number of the big boys. It's Baylor, Kentucky, Texas is in there. I think Bama's in there. I know I'm forgetting a couple others there. What's interesting about Trey Johnson is good build already. I thought he was pretty outstanding in the game that I saw him, and he is a willing distributor, pretty good defender, has some good knack for scoring. But this year's Peach Jam was all about Cooper Flagg, Cameron Boozer. His brother, Caden Boozer, helped them win the title, had the better game on Sunday in the final. AJ DeBonsa, who's a 26 player, Tyron Stokes, a 26 player. And so Johnson's a good player. I think he's 3rd in his class, but he kind of flew under the radar just a little bit down at Peach Jam. but he's a good player, man. Now he's a 24, and like he's overshadowed a little bit by Dylan Harper, but he is the kind of guy I mentioned before, like the freshmen that are not going to be expected to step in and be impact players. Objectively speaking, I think that Trey Johnson is the kind of player, depending on where he goes and how he's used, I would think that he would be in the right system, one of like the 5 or 6 most productive freshmen, provided he stays healthy. Obviously a very good scorer, and his defensive willingness, I think, will go a long way. Intriguing player. I did like him a lot.
Hey, Matt, good stuff. It's interesting, man. That COVID year, I'm telling you, it really did change a lot of things. And like I thought it was over. And then again, no, it's not. As you mentioned, there's still 2 years left of that, and what it has to shape the way rosters are put together on top of NIL and transfer portal. It is absolutely amazing. Great stuff. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you very much.
All right. Have a nice evening,
You
fellas.
too.
Thank you.
Yep. Matt Norlander with us, CBS Sports. And Jerry W., maybe I wasn't paying attention to our own show, saying, does this guy talk about anything other than Baylor? The entire first 80% of the interview was about college basketball in general and how high school prospects are now kind of getting blocked out in some ways. And then I asked him about Robert Wright, who's Baylor's commit for 2024, and then Trey Johnson, who everybody wants. You mentioned Texas and Kentucky and Baylor, among others. So I'm not sure. Maybe you were listening to a different segment than I was, or maybe you wanted to hear from a program that you're interested in. And did I miss something there? I don't know. I like to respond when questions or opinions are put up in the chat room. But John Peterson, I'm loving this men's basketball talk, but I'm a Houston fan. So, hey, Calvin Sampson and Houston are entering the Big 12, and they're going to be just fine. And I love what that guy does as a coach. I love it.
All that Houston's going to have to adjust to as a fandom is you're not going 33-1 or whatever anymore. Like, that's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean you're worse. That just means that you can go 25-8 and still win the league and be a 2 seed or
in the Big 12, you're going to have
Yeah.
a chance if you burp or you have a key injury, and even if you're deep like Houston or among others, you can burp and go into a 3 to 4 game losing streak. You just can't panic over it because it's all going to even out.
Well, you can have a 5-game stretch that's Baylor, Kansas, Texas, Iowa State on the road, like all these things that you're doing.
Yeah, a lot of us have the schedule and where you're playing them.
And so, you can have a 1-4 stretch that's really not that bad overall, and then you can go 7-0 on the next ones, even beating good teams, because the way your schedule fell is just hard.
Hey, I remember when Kansas came to Waco last year, and Baylor beat them up. And I remember Bill Self, who's used to running the conference, and yet Baylor's had their run, and Texas, of course, last year had their run, among some others who have had their run. Texas Tech, 2 or 3 years ago. And he said, and he says, listen, this is not going to be easy. And he actually mentioned that this is going to be, in a way, the win-loss record, a war of attrition because of the way the conference was, how deep it was, and playing a road game at just the wrong time against the wrong team can send you into a little bit of a funk of losing 3 out of 5 when you're not used to losing 3 games overall. When we come back, we're going to get a bucket full with Tim Brando. I mentioned earlier in the show Mark Ingram joining Fox Sports pregame. He was just out in California at the Fox Sports kind of retreat to kind of get refreshed and ready for the upcoming season. His thoughts about many things in college football. Tim Brando, next on 365 Sports. I received a text today from Ted Teague, General Manager President at Allen Samuels Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram Fiat in Waco on Loop 340, Highway 6, and just east of 84. He sent me this text that I had to kind of double take, and I love it. To get a fast start and reward veterans, Allen Samuels, through close of business on July 10th, all retired military get an extra $2,000 on top of all the other cash incentives, including the specialty incentivized interest rates, like the 2023 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo that has $3,500 plus 2.9% financing for 72 months. That's $3,500 plus 2.9% financing for 72 months. Add the $2,000 on top of that for all retired military, and that grows to $5,500 in cash values and 2.9% for 72 months for military veterans. Retired military, an extra $2,000 on top of all other cash incentives. Allen Samuels, Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram Fiat, Loop 340, Highway 6, and east of 84 in Waco.
With so many companies and policies out there, it gets so confusing shopping for insurance, and I never know if I'm getting the policy that's right for me. Luckily, I met the team at the Niche Group Insurance Agency. With the Niche Group, you can go to one company and get access to coverage options from many insurance carriers, and you get to speak to a real person about your specific coverage needs. With the Niche Group, I know I'm getting the right coverage at the right price. If you need insurance, talk to the experts at the Niche Group at 1-800-258-8302.
Automatic Chef Canteen is a full-service micro-market vending and office coffee provider with state-of-the-art vending equipment, a wide variety of products, and offering custom-fitted micro-market vending office coffee solutions for your employee break room. You want a full break room solution and a workplace oasis? Well, Automatic Chef Canteen, locally owned and operated for over 50 years in Central Texas, also includes in-house mechanics on call 24/7 for fast, reliable service and maintenance. Automatic Chef Canteen, 6900 Imperial Drive in Waco, or online at automaticchefcanteen.com.
TFNB Your Bank for Life is the official local bank of Baylor Athletics. Find out why more Central Texas are making TFNB their bank for life. Sign up for our Edge checking and savings accounts to earn interest or cash back. With 5 convenient locations and an award-winning mobile app, banking has never been easier. TFNB, your bank for life. Member FDIC.
Three Nations Brewing Company has 16 different beers on draft with a new beer every Friday. It also offers 2 air-conditioned tap rooms, a large indoor beer hall, a second-floor mezzanine offering a great overview of the brewing company and equipment and patio where you can relax under the shade. Plus, you can now experience the new Three Nations Beer Garden Grill on our shaded patio. Grab a cold beer and enjoy a bite from our freshly prepared and delicious menu. Street tacos, quesadillas, freshly cooked burgers and dogs, and veggie burgers too. Nachos and so much more, all prepared and cooked on site. So come visit the award-winning Three Nations Brewing Company on East Vandergrift off I-35 in Carrollton.
Boozers is the wedding ring store and more. If you're ready to get engaged or already married and want to upgrade your wife's ring for a special anniversary, Boozers is the place to go. With the largest selection of premier quality diamond engagement rings and wedding rings in Central Texas. They have 7 cases with over 300 styles of rings from top designers like Natalie Kay. Choose from yellow, white, or rose gold, plus beautiful top quality loose diamonds. With an in-house jeweler, they can also custom make anything you want. Bring in a picture or drawing and let Boozers create your one-of-a-kind pendant or ring. They can even use some of your old gold and diamond jewelry to create something new. At Boozers, you'll find a great selection of quality timepieces, and Boozers is the place for expert watch maintenance and repairs too. They specialize in expert Rolex watch repair for fine jewelry, watches, custom work, and more. Go to Boozers on Valley Mills and Lake Air Drive in Waco.
Boozers, the wedding ring store and more.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. Enjoying the show? Hit the like button and subscribe.
Here we go, this 5 o'clock hour. Craig Smoak back with us tomorrow. Paul Catalina, I'm David Smoak. Great friend of the show, Tim Brando, Fox Sports, joins us for a lot of different things. And Tim, thank you very much for your time. I want to start. You just were at what I guess is kind of a Fox Sports retreat. Is that correct on the West Coast?
Yeah, we have our seminar usually in August. This year we had it about a month early on July 5th, 6th, and 7th. I didn't have to be there until the 6th, so I was able to enjoy my 4th of July and not have to worry about flying until the morning of the 6th. But our NFL guys and our college guys get together. We're all together at once for an evening dinner and gathering and a little fun as well. And then it's the college guys. We're all together later the morning of the 6th the morning of the 7th, after the NFL guys had gotten together on the morning of the 6th. So, I was able to sandwich in a little golf.
Yep.
At Trump National at Rancho Palos Verdes, and it was a quick trip, probably there about 36 hours and in and out. But it's always fun to get together and see all the guys that you work with and the Fox family, so to speak. And it was informative too, because there are always some guests, some people that show up. This is the 30th anniversary of Fox Sports Television. It was created in 1994. Fox is football. It was created for football as a network in 1994. And when Rupert Murdoch purchased it and got the NFL's NFC package away from CBS, it was major news. Certainly had a ripple effect in my life, because it created some job openings at CBS, because just about all the announcers, starting with Summerall and Madden, but beyond that, Dick Stockton left, and Matt Millen left, and obviously Bradshaw left the NFL today. So it created some opportunities at CBS that I was able to take advantage of when I went to work there in 1996. So that was part of it from the football standpoint. And for us on the college side, we've built, since the NFL was on Fox, we've been able to build an entire sports division, which has enabled, from a college football standpoint, Fox to become really the number one contender to ESPN's throne for owning college football. And we're still, working our way up for sure, but I think we are the one network entity that is a threat. I'll put it that way, a threat to ESPN's control of college football. We're certainly gaining rights and adding more to our portfolio since I started there in 2014. We did not have the Big Ten at that time. We were doing Pac-12 and Big 12. Now we've added the Big Ten. Of course, the Mountain West is on late in the West Coast as well. And I don't think there's any question that most media pundits, most published reports when discussing the CFP, prominently mention Fox and ESPN as the two major suitors for that new contract when it is negotiated in the next year.
Tim, the Pac-12 has now gone a year in their media rights negotiation, and at least from the outside look, again, looks like there's no end in sight. George Kliavkoff has about 11 days before he has to go up and face all of the media that cover him on a regular basis and answer what will be the first question, I'm sure, is what's going on with the media rights. Do you think he will have an actual answer for them in 11 days?
Yeah, I hope for his sake he does, and I hope for the Pac-12's sake he does. But yeah, it's been you cannot look at and survey the landscape and look back at those that follow the business of college sports for a long period of time and not notice some of the rather public gaffes that have been made by some of the presidents of Pac-12 institutions when discussing when they thought all this would be wrapped up. Notably, the Arizona president, I think, probably was most annoyed, and and maybe the guy that most annoyed the Pac-12 commissioner when he said what he did about it being wrapped up by such and such a date, and that was months ago. So you look at the timetable, and for George Kliavkoff's purposes, they really need something to happen between now and those media days. He needs to have a story to tell, and not one of, hey, just wait, be patient. It's too late to be patient. These presidents of these universities are going to want to have answers because they don't have their nut covered financially for their athletic departments if they don't have a college football deal in place for next season. This is the last year of the deal. So you can bet that those schools that already have the grapevine, so to speak, in their left hand might want to put their right hand where their left hand is and make their jump to wherever they're going to go as an alternative to the Pac-12. If in fact he doesn't have some good news to tell them. The last thing I heard was, and not from anyone officially, but the last thing I heard from people that I trust is that the most notable opportunity for the Pac-12 right now might be an all-digital deal, and they may make some money off that. They may make more money off that than potentially they could make more money off that than if they had a network carrier. But I cannot imagine that the presidents of those universities would be satisfied with nothing but a digital deal without any linear television at all as part of its TV contract. I just don't know that would ever be approved. There could be a lot of, you got to remember, yeah, you need the money to operate, but you also have to have distribution. You have to have a way for the majority of eyeballs around the country to follow your teams. And if this were somehow a deal that was all digital with no network rights holder of any kind, whether it's on whether it's the second tier or first tier rights, to not have an over-the-air network involved would be shocking to me. It really would.
Yeah, I don't, and I don't see that. I've heard that too, and I just can't imagine that would be what is presented unless Apple just throws out an enormous amount of money. Tim, while you were there, I saw something you mentioned earlier today. Reggie Bush out, Mark Ingram the second in. Your thoughts about him and the fact that you've obviously covered him, you knew him, Alabama, Saints, and the fact he's taking over that role.
Well, listen, I like Reggie. I did. I covered both of them as New Orleans Saints players. Reggie, when he came in as a first-round pick and was part of the birth of the Saints and that incredible 2006 season when they went all the way to the NFC Finals and lost to the Bears. And then, of course, just a few years later, it only took 3 years for Sean Payton to get a world championship with Drew Brees and company. But I also got to know after I followed him at Alabama, and he won the Heisman in 2009. I'll never forget when Mark came up to CBS for the Heisman along with the other finalists and visited with Spencer Tillman and myself. He is an outgoing personality, very much like Reggie in that sense. And he's eager and the ultimate team guy. And I think that's probably what has gotten so many people excited at Fox about having Mark Ingram come in. Yeah, he's a big name. He's also a Heisman Trophy winner. And he's a guy that I think will bring a very curious audience from the South, too. That's another factor, that he's an Alabama guy. And he was excited, very excited at the seminar. I got a chance to visit with him, and he's a little bit like a sponge, He was in Spencer's ear, he was in my ear. Hey, fellas, watch me, tell me what I need to do. I'm open for any tips along the way that you could possibly give me, because I'm new at this. But if you watched him during his NFL playing days, whenever he was interviewed, he was always enjoyable. And what always happens with these guys when they're coming out of the National Football League and they've been in it for a number of years, the producers that are getting ready to do games, we're having our production meetings, and the stars of those production meetings many times can be personalities that we talk to in preparation for NFL games. I've had it happen many times. Tony Siragusa, when he was playing with the Ravens, I'll never forget Spencer and I going in to do some Ravens games when Trent Dilfer was the quarterback and they won the Super Bowl in 2000, and he was playing with Shannon Sharp. Guys like that get noticed there, and then producers go back, tell the executives who they think might be worthy of an audition. That certainly was the case with him, and he talked a little bit about that, as did our bosses when he was introduced to all of us at our gathering that Friday night. So Thursday night, I think it was. So he's going to be fantastic. As for Reggie, I'm not privy to what happened or why they could not come to terms, but Reggie certainly, alongside Matt Leinart, I thought Big Noon is sort of where it is today because of the flair with which they they have when they go on a college campus. And Reggie attracted a lot of eyeballs. I think Mark Ingram will do the same. And I know Matt and Rob Stone, our host, they're excited about it, as is Urban, about having Mark Ingram. So I think he'll be a hit. I do.
Tim, I mean, and I know that, you haven't been at ESPN in quite a long time, but last week was a really difficult week for the entire company, and who knows what the end in sight is when they figure that out. But what are your thoughts on, and it's going on around the industry, about layoffs and everything that's happening in the sports media business as it tries to reshape itself for whatever the future is?
All right. I know Smoak was alive when I was doing Game Day on ESPN.
I was.
No. Yeah, you were alive.
I was. I was too. Yeah. So
Oh, wait, Catalina, how old are you now?
I'm 43.
All right, by a smidge, you made it.
Yeah,
you made the cut.
I remember. I remember.
Yeah, a lot's changed in the time since I was there, or AKA the dinosaur era of ESPN as a company. But and I've still got a lot of friends there. Some of the highest-ranking members of their management are guys that were production assistants when I was there. Norby Williamson was a PA. He was a production assistant for SportsCenter when John Saunders and I were working together, and he's the big cheese, really. I mean, in terms of the talent and the people that are going to be on the shows from a production standpoint, both in studio and in the booth, on the air for both college football and the NFL. And I've known Norby a long time. He is a survivor. A lot of the other guys from his generation that started in the 80s have long since been let go. Most of them in that last big purge they had in 2013 were let go when they got into their mid to late 50s. So Norby's right around my age, maybe a little bit younger, but not much younger. And I know it's hard for him, especially with people that he worked with, may have worked alongside in management, and certainly from a talent standpoint, some of the guys that, he grew up in the business and at that place looking up to, including Chris Berman, who I'm sure one of the reasons Boomer is still doing that show on their digital side with, used to be with Tom Jackson. I think he's doing it with Booger McFarland now. He's a dear friend and someone I've mentored. I'm sure the reason Chris is still doing that is because Norby wants him to do it. But what happens there and what happens in our industry and other places does have an effect on the entire industry of sports television. ESPN is still the behemoth that's got the greatest volume, the most personnel, and the greatest investment in a lot of different live sports. As I mentioned, Fox is really, I think the company I work for is the one that has really made a move from a portfolio standpoint to compete regularly for rights that ESPN has in most, if not all, sports when their rights come up. CBS is not as active in that area. Nor is NBC. In fact, if you think about it, the Big Ten deal that was done this past year for the media rights, where both CBS and NBC are concerned, when they were negotiating for the right to carry Big Ten sports, they were actually dealing with Fox, who was hired by the Big Ten, and a part of their deal was to construct what the television deal would be. And the blueprint for Fox was very similar to the NFL's, where they would have multiple over-the-air networks, even competing networks, as part of their partnership in carrying Big Ten football. It was unprecedented that a deal would be done quite that way. So the impact of what's happened at Fox has really been felt, and I think, as I mentioned before, it'll be felt even further when the new CFP is being negotiated. But when it happens, something like that happens at ESPN, and it affects that many jobs and that many people, it reverberates throughout the industry, and it is not good news for anybody in the business, because fewer jobs are going to be available. And for those people that are being let go, that are hoping to find work elsewhere, there aren't many jobs at other places that fit the profile of what ESPN has had these people do. For instance, if you're a SportsCenter anchor, okay, but you don't do anything else, you've been on SportsCenter for 25, 30 years. If you lose your job, there's no other network job like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Fox doesn't have anything. Since Fox got away from its shows that were studio shows and went to embrace debate television during the day, Fox is basically now a live sports broadcast entity. And yes, it has studio shows that connect to the NFL and to college football and to World Cup and to college basketball, but they don't do a nightly news program. They don't have a news gathering arm that's doing shows that are remotely similar to SportsCenter. That is a costly investment to make. They found that out and got away from it. And it becomes a loss leader for you. And that's what's happened with ESPN in terms of the technology overtaking the news gathering business to do a nightly show with highlights and have multiple nightly shows with multiple anchors doing these different shows, but in many cases regurgitating nothing really new but the same highlights with different anchors. And I think that's where some of the quote-unquote trimming of the fat, if you will, from a management standpoint, I think that's where that comes from whenever you hear that. I was a little surprised to see so many of their SportsCenter anchors unaffected. I thought many more possibly would be. To see people that were on shows like the NBA Finals with a guy like Jeff Van Gundy, who is tremendous. I'm not a big NBA guy, but I certainly enjoyed him. That was shocking to me. And I was equally surprised to see people like David Pollack of Game Day and Gene Wojciechowski get the pink slip. Because those shows, you can be critical of ESPN all you want, but you cannot be critical. And I don't think anyone could say that College Game Day has not been one of the biggest success stories in sports television history. I mean, it's right there with inside the NBA, in my view, for overall success. Now, Big Noon has made a tremendous jump, and Fox has done a wonderful job in competing with College Game Day these last handful of years. But, David Pollack is a fairly young guy who is on that desk, probably the player that's played the most recently. And he was stepping in a lot, if you might recall, during that first hour, giving Lee Corso a bit of a rest. And I was surprised that he was shown the door. The decision-making on who to – I can't get into that. I can only make observations, and those are my observations. I was surprised that more SportsCenter talent remained, and I was surprised to see much of its talent that is on successful programming in other places were shown the door.
Tim, I want to get eventually to your tweet conversation about the greatest college football player ever and a couple of other things. But I also want to give, with all you've said about the sports media, one of the things I've been fortunate about is been able to host a talk show, do broadcasting. And now with what we've done here with this YouTube channel that's been phenomenal with our staff. But how important, like a utility infielder in baseball is usually a guy that doesn't play much because he's not good enough to be a starter. How valuable is it to have those opportunities or options to lean on in sports broadcasting?
Well, it's huge now. And as you know, I mentor a lot of young broadcasters. And listen, my heart goes out to all those that got cut. Like I said, I've got a lot of friends there. And some of them, actually, a lot of play-by-play guys have their contracts coming up either the end of last month or the end of this month. And, they're worried that they may not be retained. Now, you don't hear about them because they're still under contract. Their contracts will end. And technically, they're not being fired or shown the door or a part of the layoff. They're just not being renewed. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you're not renewed. That still means you don't have work, and you've got to try to find a golden parachute somewhere. And, that's equally difficult. whether you're laid off or your contract's not renewed, that's the date of that contract renewal is huge. And if it comes too late, college football's play-by-play rosters are done, and you have really nowhere to land if it comes that late. I tweeted this out, and I put out a post on Facebook at the end of last week saying that if you're a young broadcaster coming up, what you probably need to understand is that you need to diversify. Okay? You can no longer just dream of being the next Keith Olbermann or Dan Patrick. That's not going to work anymore. Okay? I'll just throw this out. Name a SportsCenter anchor now, not named Scott Van Pelt. How many of them do you really remember their names? Okay? Not many. Right? Am I right when I say that?
No, yeah, you're right. You could used to.
I was about to rattle off 4, and 3 of them got let go.
Yeah, so there's my point. The kids, a whole generation grew up wanting to be a SportsCenter anchor. That's what they thought a real sports broadcaster was. Now, I didn't grow up that way. I didn't even want to do SportsCenter when I got to ESPN. I wanted to do college football, college basketball, play-by-play. Now, it just so happened that I could do the studio, and for a number of years, I did it really well. And thankfully, I could do both. And I could do both at a fairly high level. And it enabled me to bring value in as many places as possible, which I think helped me hang around for a while. Long-lasting careers generally happen to those that are versatile, resourceful, and have vision. And that vision sometimes is to understand what direction the industry is going in. And the industry is going away from the teleprompter reading sports news journalist who's going to show you how to do a really kind of cute highlight that's well written. Okay, those days are gone because people are getting their highlights and their scores from their phones. They're getting it digitally. They're getting it off of The Athletic or from Outkick or from Sikkim 365. They're getting it from other places, fellas. So when you go on the air and you're not delivering anything breaking, there's no real news. Fans would tune in to watch John Saunders and me in 1987 or 1988 because we were going to have, results from the pay-per-view fight between Mike Tyson and whoever he was fighting on a given night, or the highlights from the basketball games that had been on that people didn't have time to watch in the Big East, the Big 12, the SEC, or the ACC. Those days are gone. So you got to be able to do more things. Classic example. You guys saw that Susie Colbert was one of the big names that was let go. Well, Susie's had a remarkable career, but she's been around for a while, and she basically was doing the Monday Night Countdown show, and that was it. Well, there's another young talent there, very talented young lady, Laura Rutledge, who's working every day.
Mm-hmm.
Every day. So the more reps you can deliver, the more content you're part of, okay, the more at-bats, so to speak, we could say. If you're getting more at-bats, meaning on-screen, on-air reps, the more value you bring to the company. And the greater the chance you're going to hang around, whether it's with college, whether it's with the pros. Laura's there doing NFL shows on a daily basis, and then on Saturday she's off to wherever the SEC Nation show is going to be on the SEC network doing that, because she's equally adept at handling that. So, those are the decisions that executives now are making that are going to affect young broadcasters coming up. And I would just suggest to all those young people that have those dreams that you can still have them. There's room for you to make it in our business, but you had better have more than one strong aspect to your talent. You better be more of a 5-tool talent than a 1 or a 2-tool talent. Like you better be able to hit with power, field, bring a good arm, bring as much as you can, okay, to the table, because the more things you can do, the longer lasting your career is going to be. That's what the industry is telling us when these kinds of things happen. Now, all that said, ESPN as a company has done really well for itself. I mean, they were the number one success story, I think, in television in the 80s, and they certainly grew, and the proliferation of cable began with them, as well as the superstation with WTBS back in the 80s. You look at what's happening now and the cord cutting that's taking place. Maybe the mistake that might have been made was the investment into the digital side, because so much money has been put in there and it's been draining a lot of these media companies. And that's one of the things I love about working at Fox. Fox is an over-the-air network station that cares about what? Football, and lots of it. And when not football, college football. And when not college football, we got the All-Star game tomorrow night, another big event. And, oh, by the way, World Cup and Women's World Cup. It's about live event programming. And there's an insatiable appetite on the part of our country to go to over-the-air free network TV to get its big events. And the people that run that company understood that. And, they're not concerned terribly about how their nighttime lineups are going to fare. They don't produce. I remember the jokes about Fox and The Simpsons and all that in the beginning. And they don't even worry about that anymore. Let's just find another sporting event to put on, because that's what the viewer habits in America are. If the two things that are driving audiences now in television are sports and politics. And because of that, cable news is still hot, and live over-the-air sporting events is still very hot. And the most watched shows in television are, generally speaking, going to be sporting events. And the more of them that you can do, the more of them that you know how to do, the better the opportunities you're going to have as your career moves forward.
Tim, I know we're up against the clock, but you were asked by somebody about who was the greatest college football player you ever saw.
Yeah. To me, and the question was modern era, too.
Right.
In other words, it was defined at post-1970. So we're going to draw the line at 53 years ago. If we wanted to encompass the 60s, and we just wanted to talk about college football in my lifetime, and maybe yours, David, I would say the most impactful college football player of my lifetime was Roger Staubach, when he was at Navy. Now, a lot of people forget, because he was Captain America with the Dallas Cowboys, they forget how impactful he was in the 60s. I mean, he's the last from a military academy player to win a Heisman. And he may be the last, that may last into infinity. Okay. I mean, it could. He could be the last ever. But this was from 1970 forward. And with that in mind, I went with Herschel Walker. And I did because of the combination of speed and power and influence and impact that he had on the way the game was played. Now, there were derivatives of him, okay? Power backs of that generation that were running the eye, like George Rogers, who actually won the Heisman the following year. George, and I'll never forget, George won the Heisman when Herschel was a sophomore. And, of course, that particular time, it was Herschel that was on his way to taking the Bulldogs to their only national championship until they've gotten the last two in back-to-back years. But George won it and went to the Saints in 81. Herschel, when he won it in 80, played against George, and I'll never forget watching that game. And we were just waiting for the big runs that we're going to have. And Herschel had his fair share as well. And I'm somewhat partial to Herschel because I saw him at the USFL level when Donald Trump paid for him to come to the Generals, and he left Georgia after his junior year. He's the first player to do that. People forget that he was the first player to actually only have 3 years in and go. And the NFL wasn't taking them then, but he went to the Generals after 3 years at Georgia and broke the all-time rushing record, and I got to call that play when he went 55 yards against the Jacksonville Bulls in June of 1985. And that was a thrill for me. I saw him with my own eyes, and I also saw him with my own eyes running the anchor leg on the 4x100 national championship team at Georgia in track and field. And that was at LSU. He was running with the likes of Mel Latney on his team down at Bernie Moore Track Stadium. And I saw that with my own eyes as a young broadcaster in Baton Rouge. No one combined speed and power and changed the game. Now, look, Bo Jackson came along. Everybody's got a favorite. I know that. And a lot of fans in your part of the world will mention, well, wait a minute. What about Earl Campbell? Yeah. Earl came before, yes. And Earl was a great player, yes. But he did not combine the combination of both the power and the speed to break away like a sprinter, okay, as did Herschel Walker. He had both. He could run you over and he could run by you. And that, to me, is what set him apart. Fans can have fun with that all they want. I realize not everybody's going to agree with me, and that's fine. But for my money, in my lifetime, certainly from 1970 forward, the greatest college football player I ever saw, running over Bill Bates like a rag doll as a freshman. That is a play that will, and we all know how tough Bill Bates is, or was, and Herschel did that. My God, he's a freshman. Larry Munson, I'll never forget that call. And nobody knew how good he was going to be. Even Vince Dooley didn't. And of course, Vince named his black Doberman after asking permission. He named him Herschel at home for his family. And Herschel was very proud to have Vince do that. But that's my guy. I'm going to go with Herschel Walker, and I didn't get a lot of pushback. I just had a lot of fans from other places saying,
sure.
Well, what about Bo Jackson? What about Earl? What about And honestly, the guy that I think gets overlooked a lot as all-time great running back, fellas, if you were growing up when we were, O.J. Simpson was the goods. I mean, until I think O.J. made that position, the eye back in that generation. He made it the biggest of deals. I mean, he really, really did. But he did not have the size of a guy like Herschel Walker. And that's why Herschel had the ability to hang as long as he did. And you never saw him run over people, OJ did, but he got away from people, Herschel was the Jim Brown of this generation, put it that way.
Yeah, there's a few that when Earl in college had, and we have to break here, but Earl in college had size and speed. Bo Jackson did and Herschel did. You would not go wrong with any of them. But when someone says, what's your all-time favorite or the best, that doesn't mean 5. It means 1. You could go on forever. 1. It means 1, so you gotta cut it off at that. So, hey, Tim, can't wait to talk to you more as we hit college football season. And even before that, thank you so much, as always, for your time with us.
You got it. I wish I could tell you where I'm going to be, but since we met earlier than normal because we're having the Women's World Cup coming up, it'll probably be another 2.5 to 3 weeks before I know what my first 3 weeks of the schedule looks like. But as soon as I know, you'll know. Okay. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. Tim Brando, Fox Sports, with many things we discussed today involving college football, sports media, and even advice for younger sportscasters or broadcasters.
Do you want me to text Hellman, just tell him we ran long today?
Yeah, I think so, because, I mean, we won't be able to. I want to get to a couple of super chats, and let's get to one of them. Paul, you could help me out with this because you're a nighttime guy. You out to the bars all the time. So, Chris, let me see. Is that top chat? Yeah. Where was it? Chris. And there was an earlier one about AAU when it comes to academics, and we'll try to get that one too. Chris goes, Baylor plays Utah September 9th. I'm thinking of coming back to Texas to visit family and watch that game. Can you recommend some good bars and food options for me? Thanks, guys. Chris, it all depends if you're a beer guy, mixed drinks. If you're wanting to go to a couple of places just because you want to have a mixed drink, one of the great tourism places now in Waco, you hear about Magnolia, the Silos. Balcones is a fantastic place to go by. They got the distillery there, but they don't really. The food options are very, very small.
Yeah, they do. I mean,
It
they would do
depends on
things
you
like
want a chain
like a tasting
or
room.
a local place.
So I would say if you're going to go on the road, my rule is you don't go to chains unless that chain is somewhere you can't get
right
in your. If
or
it's
your
like a
own
regional,
place.
like if you've never been to a Bojangles Chicken, we don't have them here. You go where they are. But I think if you're going to come here, for sure. Hellberg Barbecue, I took a friend who's still in town there today. Is really fantastic. Guest Barbecue is really good.
You're talking about sports bars.
Oh, so you want sports bars?
Sports bars.
Sports bars.
I mean, there's restaurants. There's 1,000 of them now.
George's is the best one
That's the one everyone goes to. That's the one everyone mentions a lot, just like they do with a couple of barbecue places. But, one of the things about Baylor tailgating is that they've opened that up. And so we have, and I'm not just saying it, at 365 Sports with what Brian and Ashley and Colt have done, they've got a hell of a deal as far as tailgating. But that's also, I think, you have to buy tickets to get into that. Or you have to get like a ticket to get into that.
Breweries, we've got Brotherwell just down the street from us. We've got Bear Arms, which is fantastic. Southern Roots, you've been to Southern Roots.
Southern Roots is really nice, and it's
really,
got great
really
food.
Yeah.
At least when we've been there.
Yeah.
I don't know if they do that all the time.
I'll tell you, Crickets, I was in there. Obviously,
near the Hilton Hotel,
the Hilton right across. They've got a really great new selection of beers and food, and they're a good place to go sit and watch a game at
and
the
then
bar.
one is further away. It's probably a longer drive, but Salty Dog's a place that has pretty good food, and also they have drinks. It's a great sports bar, a very smaller one, but that's one of the first places I started going to when I moved to Waco.
And we have a Walk-Ons, if you've never been to a Walk-Ons, which is a really cool place as well. That's the best as far as watching.
That gives you a chance and gives you an idea. Now, there was another super chat, Paul, and I can't find it now, about the AAU.
So,
all right.
Here's a great thing about these. Now they have a fan funding tab, so they save them for us until the end of the show. From Charlie Casado, does AAU actually mean anything? Last time I checked, Kansas is the only AAU member in the new Big 12. Do you think Stanford or Cal will be better interest for the Big 12 than Arizona or Colorado?
Okay, let me tell you something. The answer to that is I love the question. We appreciate the super chat. There is no way in hell that Stanford and Cal want to be a part of the Big 12 or a part of anything to do with the Big 12. So even though all that's true, they want to be a part of whatever they can keep intact when it comes to the Pac-12. And on top of that, correct me if I'm wrong, Stanford and Cal don't want probably 80% of whatever's the Big 12. They don't. It's just not a matter. It's oil and water when it comes to Stanford and Cal. But Stanford and Cal in the Big 12, they would laugh you off the conversation or laugh you in your face or hang up on you if that was the case. Even if there are no other options, if things start to go bad, which again, I think the Pac-12 will find a way to survive, whatever that might be.
And to answer the question, does AAU mean anything? It depends on what you're talking about, but it's a tremendously prestigious thing, and it's great.
It really matters in the Big Ten.
It really matters in the Big Ten. That's what they're doing.
Even with Nebraska having it and no longer having it because of the medical school.
The medical school is not in the same zip code or some crazy wonky rule or whatever it is. But, yeah, they are it's very important. But I don't think that right now, other than, the Big Ten trying to keep that same thing together, and again, they're not – the Big Ten saying AAU schools, they're drawing from a small pool anyway. And so if you're trying to have the Venn diagram of AAU school and school that they want, that's probably the thing that they would only look for anyway. So it's not like they're going to pull outside of it. But it is a tremendously huge deal. But it's not a huge deal for everybody because you can't make it a huge deal for everybody because the reason it's a big deal is because everybody can't be in it.
No, you don't. And you hear about that. And then and we've had these conversations. Paul's Top 5 is coming up next. But you've had these conversations about when somebody is either interested or not from the football perspective, from the eyeballs perspective, from the television numbers perspective, then you start the part of the argument of the rebuttal, default, or but is you get into the AAU or the R1 or whatever. And with Dr. Livingstone at Baylor now, Baylor is now what, Tier 1 R1?
They're R1.
And they'll never, they will not, I don't see, and I had somebody from Baylor tell me this, I don't think they'll ever be AAU. I think there's always, there's some politics involved.
No, but also the way that some of their things are structured,
Sure.
they don't fall into it unless they'd have to restructure things.
Well, here's what I mean. Who's the
do.
last team that won the national championship in college football because they were AAU?
because they were AU or happen to be AU is a different thing, and not because. No, I mean.
But I get it. It's nice if you are, and you want to be if you can be. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I can tell you from personal experience when FSU won in 1999, not that there weren't a lot of smart kids on that squad, but I knew a lot of those guys too, and they were not they were not talking about Keats when they were in there different times. They were not debating
Were they talking about Teats?
They were not debating the benefits of artificial intelligence versus the dangers of AI as it grows. They were like, did you see that butterfly?
Yeah.
It was a weird
there's
color.
a duck.
Yeah, it was odd stuff.
All right, when we come back, Paul Catalina's top 5. I do know tomorrow Adam Rittenberg from ESPN, he's been all over and throughout the last 3 or 4 days, as have others on the Northwestern story. What will be the latest? We'll have him tomorrow and more. And this is 365 Sport. Hold on just a second.
I have to mention something. Justin mentioned on the thing that I did not mention Shorties, and I absolutely have to mention Shorties. They're great friends of mine. They're great friends of the program. I saw Kyle, one of the owners, just the other day. Shorties is a great place to go to.
Pat Fitzgerald has been fired as head coach at Northwestern.
Wow.
That happened in a hurry. You could see this building. Pete Thamel, Adam Rittenberg, he'll join us tomorrow. Matt Fortuna. Many people are now putting out there. And who put that up in the super chat? Extra thank you to that. Phil Venzer out of Vegas. Great guy. Appreciate it, Phil. Breaking news, Northwestern coach has been fired. That happened quickly. It was almost as if it became this story. The university did their investigation. And then fire ants. You started to see, and I even mentioned, for example, Dan Wolkin, Pat Forty, and others started saying, even after I think Friday, that he needs to resign. And there is now much more information that's come about since even late Friday afternoon.
Well, the other thing that they did was they hired a law firm. The law firm did the thing, and they released it. And it sounds very similar to something we know.
Yes,
Smokey, and it just.
But they did not. They redacted a lot of stuff.
And so there was going to be stuff that came out. The university should have done themselves a favor before they even did this and like slap on the wrist suspension, said, okay, we've investigated this incident. We've got to go further. And because clearly there were going to be accusations after that when it came out if there was other hazing going on. And so, yeah, that escalated quickly.
That did very, very quickly. And when we come back, Paul Catalina's top 5.
The future's bright. The time is now.
College is what you make it. It's a late-night pizza run and all-nighters coding a new project. It's having big dreams and making them a reality. It's a professor who knows your name and your story. It's preparation for your future, your calling, your life. And at Baylor, it's even more. Baylor, where lights shine bright.
Aaron Duvall, owner, Texas Beef House. Aaron, it's premium grade East Texas beef, and you're located just outside of Tyler. No hormones, no antibiotics, no steroids, the kind of beef that people want. And then also your label is what catches people's attention as well.
Yes, we have a all-natural, pasture-raised Wagyu beef. It's a USDA label. That means our cattle never spend any time in the feed yard. They go straight from the pasture to the day of harvest, and we oversee the whole process from the beginning of the genetic choices when we make these matings to the time the calves are born, to the feed choices, all the way through when the animals are harvested. So we oversee the whole thing as a family, and we just believe, life's too short to eat average beef. So we offer people a chance to step up their game and try Wagyu beef at TexasBeefHouse.com.
Where is the best beef in Texas? Your house. When you order from Texas Beef House, unleash the flavor of Texas raised Wagyu from our pasture to your plate. TexasBeefHouse.com.
Let Camille Johnson Realtors guide you seamlessly through the process of buying your dream home or selling your current one. Commercial, farm and ranch, or residential, Camille Johnson Realtors can smoothly and successfully lead you through any transaction. With a team of 28 experienced agents who are excited about serving you, Camille Johnson Realtors services the entire greater Waco area. If you're in the market to buy or sell, contact Camille Johnson Realtors, 104 Midway Center in Woodway, or find them online at www.camillejohnson.com. Camille Johnson Realtors, elegant, charming, warm, welcome home.
Stepping into a new pair of boots is great, but stepping into the boots of a U.S. Army officer can also add confidence and leadership skills to your son or daughter's career path. There are more than 150 occupational specialties to help them find the best fit for their future. See all the things your son or daughter can achieve in our boots at GoArmy.com. U.S. Army Waco Recruiting Company, 254-598-8131 or 254-776-1543.
There are 26 letters in the alphabet, over 600,000 words in the dictionary, and just 3 of them said together can change everything. Let's order pizza. Those 3 words lead to dough made from scratch and 3 fresh signature cheeses that blanket golden crust in a heavenly melt on Marco's Pizza that'll blow your mind. So visit Marcos.com to order and stop by Marco's Pizza in Belmead, China Spring, Woodway, and in Robinson. Marco's. Pizza lovers get it.
Did you know that 1 out of every 4 men have symptomatic low levels of testosterone and don't even know it? And if you think you're too young to worry about it, guess again. Low T levels can make you feel tired and grumpy, raise your cholesterol, and cause weight gain. Petty Clinic Low T can set up same-day blood screening and results. So if you're tired of being tired, call or go online at pettycliniclowt.com. It's a private clinic with an atmosphere catering to men. Affordable, only $165 a month, including lab work, office consultation, testosterone injections, and follow-up visits, compared to $300 or more a month in Dallas or Austin, and you don't have to drive 90 miles one way or the other and fight the traffic. Petty Clinic Low T has board-certified physician consultations and will provide the best form of brand-strength testosterone. Contact Petty Clinic Low T for increased energy, improvement in sexual desire and performance, mood, concentration, even a decrease in body and belly fat. Just off Highway 84 and Old Hewitt Drive in Woodway, pettycliniclowt.com.
It's time for Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Where's the best beef in Texas? Your house when you order from Texas Beef House. Unleash the flavor of Texas-raised Wagyu. From our pasture to your plate, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Welcome back. Last Friday, I did top 5 things Texas has to do to win the Big 12. I'll continue that series. Top 5 things K-State has to do to win the Big 12, until we get to a point where it may be too much of a stretch to think a team is going to win the Big 12 during the year. So maybe the top, 7 teams, Smokey, would say have a chance to win at 6?
Well, last year, TCU, I thought, was picked 7th.
Yeah.
And the year before that, Baylor was picked 6th or 7th.
Yeah, so top 6 or 7. We'll determine when we get down to 6 or 7 if the other one has a chance to get in or not. But top 5 things that K-State has to do to win the Big 12. Number 5, replace Deuce. And look, they're gonna do it with 2 guys, in Trayshawn Ward and Dylan Giddens, both of whom are very talented. And you can't expect to replace the big plays, because that's what made Deuce special, was the fact that it was, he was good for getting you first downs and things like that, but also, one defender goes the wrong way by an inch and he is past them.
Somebody misses an angle, misses a gap, boom, he's gone.
And he's just gone. And there's nothing you can do about it. That you can't sit there and expect these guys to do that. Not that they can't. I mean, I've seen Trayshawn Ward do it a lot. Giddens is a good player, but not to that level of Deuce Vaughn. But that's a big thing. You have to do that, because that will enable Will Howard to play with the confidence that he was playing with at the end of last year.
Yep, I agree. He's like a BB being shot through a keyhole.
Yeah. But if you have these 2 guys that are productive in the run game, you can replace him in the aggregate. Number 4, find new playmakers at wide receiver. You lose a couple of guys who are very reliable for you in Cade Warner,
right,
and Knowles. Both those guys were very, very good. Now you have Phillip Brooks coming back. He's an excellent kick returner. He can make plays for you.
They spit out guys like Brooks.
Yeah, but you are going to have to find some of those other guys. Cade Warner, I think, is going to be maybe even a bigger loss than people realize, because he was so ridiculously reliable.
Right.
He was a first down. He was a red zone touchdown.
Yep.
He was that, like, okay, it's 3rd and 11. Go 2 yards past the sticks. He's going to catch it. So they have to replace those guys. But I think that they will. They seem to, again, like you said, just like, okay, open up the little factory door and they come out. But it is,
and they're usually pretty good size too.
It's about reliability, so they have to get to that point.
Yep.
I think they will, but that's going to be a key for them.
I agree.
Number 3, keep going on D. Like, whatever that attitude that he has shot into the veins of the Wildcat defense, and yeah, they lost a couple really good players, but they've got to just keep going, keep that attitude, and keep the way that, even in games where they give up a lot of points, Kansas State, they know deep in their bones that they can get a stop if they need to. They believe it. Whether that's always true, look, they only lost, 3 games last year. So whether that's always true or not doesn't matter. If you believe it's true, it's true.
There's a culture, that word gets overused. There's just something they play. Usually Kansas State is not going to beat themselves. Now, there will be a game where they just have one of those games, but they're not going to beat themselves. They didn't do it with Snyder for years and years and years twice, and they're not doing that with Kleiman. Very rarely. When that happens, it's a surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 2, make teams play your way. That was the thing that I noticed about Kansas State last year. Oklahoma State, that game was, they made them play their way. They ground them into a fine powder, and they put them in an urn and sent them back to Stillwater. That's what happened to Oklahoma State last year, and that's really how Kansas State announced their presence on the scene. When they beat TCU, now it wasn't the whole game, but when they beat TCU in the Big 12 title game, they were able to make TCU play their way.
Yep.
And TCU came back when they couldn't make them play their way. That is where I think it's the strength and the weakness, because some of the teams, like a team like TCU, because you're so wide open, if they get hot for a little while, it doesn't matter if you make them play, your way for 3 quarters. If they can play their way for 1 quarter, they can score so fast. But if you can continue to make teams play your way and be as physical as they are, they're going to go far.
TCU came back because this guy came off the mountain with these plates. His name was Moses Duggan.
Yeah,
that's what happened.
Absolutely,
almost just not quite enough.
Yeah, he needed a little bit more Gatorade, and he might have gotten it there. And number 1, Will Howard stays on the upward trend. If he improves, if you think about the improvement from 2 years ago to last year, if he can make even a 10% jump on that, that's the guy who's going to be the first team all Big 12 quarterback. No offense to Quinn Ewers or Jalen Daniels or anybody else. That is going to be the first team quarterback, because that was an exponential improvement. And now he goes in knowing he's the starter and not having to wait for someone to get hurt, which he did last year. And then when he stepped in, it was like the job was his all along.
No, I agree. This guy, it was a game against Baylor when they came in and just,
oh, gosh.
They reached inside Baylor's competitive soul. It was when he came in, because I think Martinez got sacked on 4th down. Baylor took over, didn't do much with it. And the next thing you know, the game was 35-3.
I think that was the game that broke Baylor.
I think it is, too.
I think that was the one where they just...
There may have been only a game or 2 left, but that was the one that broke Baylor.
That they just, after that, they just did not have the...
Yeah, and then, of course, the TCU ending not only broke him, it put him the night-night.
Yeah, absolutely. But, yeah, if he does that, he'll be widely talked about, because he has made great strides. And he's a fun player to watch. And someone who... If you had to just base it on his play on the field the first 2 years he was thrown into things, you would not have said, okay, this guy comes in. As a matter of fact, when Martinez got hurt in the game he had to come into, it was like, well, that was good for, good while it lasted, Kansas State. And then they played better.
I was impressed. And what I was impressed with as well is how he managed it. His poise, as if he belonged there, kind of like Wyatt Thompson mentioned earlier, the voice of Kansas State. All right.
There we go.
Thank you, Paul. Who's tomorrow?
Tomorrow, I guess, would be Oklahoma, because they're picked 3rd.
As far as the poll is 3rd. Okay, thanks to Jack McKenzie. Not quite as long as Paul's vacation, but glad he's back. Also, Levi Caraway, Emery Winter. When people take time off here, it's important, and they earned it. Paul took a little bit longer than earned. I'm never going to let you forget that.
Look, it was 11 shows. It was 11 shows.
16 days.
Yeah,
in
but
another
only
country.
11 shows.
In another country. All right, Garrett, thank you very much. Everybody, if I haven't mentioned you, thank you so much. Sports Tonight, 365 Sports Tonight at 10:30 tonight on the CW. Back full throttle. Craig's back with us tomorrow. I'm David for Paul. Good night. Thanks to the chat room and our sponsors. This is 365 Sports.
Ideal MRI is a small family business right here in